to the February 15th, 2024 Finance Committee meeting of the City Council. Committee members present, myself, Councilor Di Natale, Councilors Cruz, Boschman, Zarella, and Walsh. Please be advised that FATV is conducting an audio and video recording of this meeting for public broadcast. I ask that anyone in the audience who is recording this meeting to please identify themselves for the record now by standing and stating your name and address or city of residence. Seeing none. At this time, I ask that all electronic devices be placed into silent mode. Public comment, other than department heads who will be called up at your specific order that's being brought up. If there's anyone in the public that wishes to speak, you have no more than 2 minutes, and you may speak on an item before us on the agenda. Please state, sorry, I'm reading this off. I invite anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to please approach the podium, identify yourself by name and address, and identify the agenda item on which you would like to speak. And then you may speak on it for not more than 2 minutes. This, of course, does not apply to department heads where the orders pertain to. Is there anyone who wishes to speak?
Good evening. My name is Christopher Batinzi. I live at 43 East Street. I rise to speak regarding two matters, the first of which being 022-24 regarding monies appropriated to the DPW. On page 2, I believe. So I saw this agenda item, and I see that the specific outlay requested is $400,000 for salt. And I just would encourage the body and the council larger to think about whether $400,000 is a reasonable amount of money for this fiscal year, which expires at the end of June, today being February 15th, given the potential snowfall, given the potential use of salt between now and the end of the fiscal year. And if $400,000 is reasonable, given the contracts or the usage or whatever it is, then that's certainly one thing. But if $400,000, which seems like a lot of money to me, $400,000 could be used in other ways, in better ways by the city, then I would encourage the city to think about maybe reducing or striking that amount in total for salt. And then second, I rise to speak regarding the last item on the agenda, 8-24, which seems to be a topic that has garnered much concern regarding the money to be transferred from the law department personal services to the law department expenses. I rise to speak about the philosophy of shrinking and making the budget more opaque. Specifically, when I look at, and I've heard comment this past week by members of the public regarding that money and the legal services budget with comparisons to Leominster or Lunenburg or whatnot. I'm looking at Leominster's budget right this minute. And in Leominster's budget, they have 3 line items for their city solicitor position. Those line items being for, quote, litigation, quote, legal services fees, and, quote, collective bargaining. The budget that this city has passed is more robust, more accountable, more transparent, and better than Leominster's. We are better in this aspect than Leominster is because our legal department is more accountable to this body than Leominster's budget is. I would urge this body to reject the finance item because in my mind it's a slippery slope towards a system of opaqueness, of non-transparency. Our city discloses the amounts of money we spend on multiple matters, specifically one of those being judgments or settlements. And that money, for some reason, is credited against the legal services budget when, in fact, it's an expense borne by the city. To put it short, if the city incurs a debt because we're being sued and we're wrong or we settled, that's an amount of money that we as the taxpayers bear. And that has been disclosed for many years under many administrations, whereas the city of Leominster does not do that because of their budgeting process. I think our budget and the reasons for our budget are better, more transparent, and more accountable than the cities of Leominster, of Lunenburg, who hire outside counsel, who do not provide budgets itemizing other additional expenses, which the city of Fitchburg does. So the net effect of those other towns is to hide the costs, the true costs of the legal services provided to the residents of those towns whereas the city of Fitchburg has been very transparent and very clear in its expenses and has an amount of money that is charged against the city solicitor legal fees budget, whereas those other towns don't. And my position is that passing that item, specifically 08-24, moving one money from here to one money there, the practical effect is that it deletes a line item. The secondary effect is that shifts the money towards the law firm's income or whatever it is. But it's, in my mind, an opportunity for the law firm in this city to then begin the process of shrinking our line items and shrinking its accountability to its residents down to the bare minimum. The bare minimum here being hourly fees, retainers, collective bargaining agreements, which is less robust and less itemized than the current budget we have. Our current budget has over 10 specific line items for each individual area that we spend money on, one of which being personnel services, one of which being the city solicitor's yearly fee, one of which being the amounts of money we spend in settlement, et cetera, et cetera. I would urge the community, or I would urge this finance committee to recommend to the city council at large that we maintain Fitchburg's openness, transparency, and its forthrightness, quite frankly, to its residents by rejecting 08-24 and the $40,000 appropriation from one to the other. Thank you.
Anybody else wishing to speak? And as you can see, that I've gone over the 2 minutes, as is my discretion to do so as chair, seeing as how there's not many people in the audience outside department heads. Try to keep it to 2, but if you have to go over, that's fine.
That's Lisa McMaster from 86 Warren Street. I'm here also to speak on 008-24. I spoke at the City Council that I would hope that you would reject this order. I feel that there's no transparency with this. When I watched the meeting the other night on the legislative, when Councilman Kuchar said that we had already spent $1,200 on a 2-hour meeting, and that's including travel time to and from, which nobody seemed to know that when the contract was read or signed or whatever. We have plenty of local lawyers that could probably take this on if the mayor chooses not to go with the one that we have currently. To keep the assistant counsel, but not to keep the lawyer is one thing, but you're not doing us any service, and I'm talking about the citizens of Fitchburg who voted to put people into office by allowing this money to go somewhere where it shouldn't be going. We already have a line item on that. I am asking, I don't have as much information as the gentleman here does, but that was quite good, actually. I'm impressed that I feel that we need to start streamlining and start being a little more transparent, about these issues. And this one right here I think is detrimental to the city. It's like you said, a slippery slope. Start here and then work your way down. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Janet Yost, 2 Brigham Park, and as the woman before me just said, I'm not as well informed as the gentleman that preceded us. I just would like to add my vote for not supporting changing the money. I think that I'm disappointed. One of the key tenets of our current mayor's campaign was that of transparency, and that has not been the case in this situation. And I'm concerned as a resident and homeowner since 1991 that we are setting a precedent that does not serve us well. So thank you.
Good evening. My name is Andy Van Hazinga. I'm City Councilor for Ward 4. We had a very long discussion about this in the Legislative Affairs meeting a week ago, and can't talk about everything we talked about them in 2 minutes. I am going to still try to keep the 2 minutes. But I want to hit the high points. Our mayor has selected Meade, Tallerman, and Costa to represent the city as city solicitor. Attorney Meade is eminently qualified. She is a former city solicitor of the city of Somerville, former mayor and councilman in the city of Newburyport. Her firm represents a significant number of communities across the state and provides legal services. I talked to chair of the Board of Selectmen in Lunenburg and also the town administrator in Townsend, and they were effusive in their praise for the firm and for Attorney Costa specifically, who we will mostly be dealing with in legal matters in the city. They could not recommend them higher. The firm specializes in municipal law, which is of great value in the services that we receive, in the questions we have, and the need for legal advice that we have. They have a specialist who is familiar with airports, which is of particular concern for us. So we will receive very good legal services from this firm by all indications. And it's something that our city needs, because a great deal of what we do depends on having reliable and dependable and accurate legal advice. Some of the issues were raised with the possible conflicts with the city code. I can say that our council president has been hard at work identifying those and identifying a solution forward to address them. Other costs were raised about the cost, or other concerns were raised about the cost of switching the method in which we pay the city solicitor. And I can assure you that if you look at what we budget and spend on legal services, we spend a lot, especially relative to other cities our size. So we have significant resources available to spend on legal services, and I think we have sufficient resources available to spend. What we're doing tonight is moving money from one bucket to another to pay for legal services. We've already budgeted for legal services, we're just shifting it to another bucket to pay for legal services. In terms of transparency, I look at this the exact opposite way. This increases transparency, because when Mead, Tellerman, and Costa does work for us, they send us an itemized bill. We have a list of what they worked on, the amount of time they worked on it. We know exactly what they are doing, what they're working on, and what our money is being spent on. When we have a city solicitor on payroll for the city, we don't get an itemized allocation of their time. They continue, our last solicitor had a private practice on the side, which he continued to operate. He worked part-time for the city, part-time for his own practice. We have his estimates, but we have no idea how much he worked. It's not cataloged at all. There's less transparency in that format of having a part-time city solicitor on payroll. There is greater transparency for having a contract arrangement where we get an itemized list of what the firm is working on, what work they're doing on what issue, and we know what we're getting. We know we're getting value for our money. So I do think there needs to be more work to be done to straighten out all the concerns, but as an interim step to make sure that we can continue to move forward and function as a city and get legal services we need, I think the first step is to approve this transfer. This is money we've already budgeted for legal services. It's still going to be spent on legal services, and we can work out the details about making any changes to the code which may be necessary to facilitate this and to make sure that we are protected as a city and everything is done well. So thank you very much.
I don't believe anybody else from the public is here to speak, other than those pertaining to the orders. So we move on to the agenda. 01324, order that the City of Fitchburg approves the expenditure of funds from the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security Violence Against Women Act federal grant program in the approximate amount of $74,155.78 for the purpose of retaining the police department's domestic violence advocate position, as well as to support training and provide supplies during DV Awareness Month. Captain Giannini.
Good evening, Council. I apologize, I'm getting over a chest, so my voice is a little scratchy tonight. We've been getting the VAWA grant since roughly 2009. We're partially paying for the domestic violence advocate position. It's paid for it full-time since 2016. We have a new domestic violence advocate that we hired in November, and this pays her full salary as well as fringe, some training for her throughout the year, as well as some materials that she prints and gives to victims for other resources in the city. So it's an excellent program. It's been a success for a long time, and I appreciate it if you support it.
Motion to approve?
Oh,
I'll withdraw.
Motionman.
I got a question. On this person you hired, it seems like we're going through quite a bit. There was a girl prior to this one, then you hired a new one, and now you got another new one?
We've only had 3 domestic violence advocates in the last 12 or 13 years.
Yeah, one was in there for a long time, if I'm not
And
mistaken.
the last one, I mean, I don't want to get too much into her personal business, but she lived in Worcester. and she ended up getting a similar job in Worcester, where she gets to work from home. So that's why she left.
Okay.
She left on excellent terms, and her exit interview, she had nothing bad to say about the city of Fitchburg.
All right. Okay, that's all I want to know. Oh, Marcus.
Council Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question. When this advocate, this person goes to visit a survivor, are they accompanied by a uniformed police officer, or do they go by themselves?
The initial recommendation is also by the uniformed police officer that initially dealt with the survivor, but she meets with the survivors alone. There is 1 day a week she does go out and do follow-up visits with high-risk survivors, and those high-risk visits are done with a police officer. Although he's not in uniform, it's a detective, but he is present.
Thank you. You have the floor. Thank you.
Council Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say that the Fitchburg Police Department has had a person in this position for a really long time, and I think you were one of the first police departments to, or at least to have it continue for so long. So I just want to commend you for that, and I would be definitely in favor of this. So
Thank you. I think we were a little ahead of the curve. Now it's the norm, but thank you for your comment.
Council Boschman.
Final question. When this party in the police department goes into domestic violence scene and the party gets arrested, do they both parties go to court after, or is it just one party that goes to court, or do they not go to court?
The person that is arrested is held on a minimum 6-hour hold, so he has to stay in the cell for 6 hours. They call it a cool-down period, and he has to, or typically he, but the defendant does have to go to court the next day. The victim doesn't always have to go the next day, but they would have to attend at later dates.
But does the police go, like if you responded to, with the advocate, to a domestic violence scene,
Yep.
and you witnessed it with her, and you arrest the guy and he has his cooling off period, there's charges filed, does the police officer go to court, or is it her that goes to court?
No, the police officer wouldn't go to court until it actually went to trial, which could be several months. It's the advocate that goes with her.
And do they go to court? Do they go to trial if they're called to?
Certainly, yep.
You? All right. All right, thank you.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve. If there are no objections, it is approved. Thank you. 01424, order that the City of Fitchburg approves the expenditure of funds for the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security Justice Assistant Grant, JAG, allocation in the approximate amount of $45,702.51 to address unmet criminal justice and officer safety needs in the form of new radios and accessories. Captain Giannini.
This grant particular is all equipment. We purchased 14 new radios. Each radio costs over $3,200 to purchase the radio and then to have it programmed properly. So it's quite an expense, as you can see, for the city. So we're fortunate to get this grant. Saves the city of Fitchburg $45,000 in needed equipment. This equipment is for our new officers when they come on, and we currently have about 4 different style radios that are matriculating through the department. And this would replace the oldest style, which is a much bigger, heavier radio than the newer ones.
Make a motion, we accept.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to accept 01424. If there are no discussions, it's approved. 02624, order that the City of Fitchburg hereby approves the expenditure of funds from the Shannon Community Safety Initiative Grant awarded by the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security in the approximate amount of $450,250.50 for the purpose of partnering with multiple agencies to reduce gang and youth-related violence.
This, again, is a long-standing grant in the city. In fact, I've stood before the council for almost a decade now, every year, promoting this grant. It does tremendous good in all 3 cities of Leominster, Fitchburg, and Gardner. We touch people in positive methods with the Junior Police Academy. We assist the schools in truancy, and we're tied in with the local agencies such as the YMCA and MOC, doing mentoring and after-school programs, as well as the enforcement portion, which has been very successful in taking a good amount of drugs and firearms off the street pretty much every year for the last decade plus. So I would appreciate your support on this one also.
Councilor Boschman.
Could you elaborate more on We get what, about $100,000 out of this grant a year?
The police department specifically gets just under 85,000.
85,000?
Are you talking about the police department or the city of Fitchburg in general? Or?
The city of Fitchburg in general, because
All right,
the
so
way
we
I
get-
understand it, you said that it goes to different organizations to help out too, like you
It does,
mentioned
sir.
the YMCA.
We get just under $85,000. Also in the city is Mock, making opportunities count. They get the largest portion of $105,000. They do a lot of after-school programs. They have innovation centers. They help support youth jobs in the summer, and they supplies and advisory boards that they have. We also have the Shining Light Ministry, which is on Elm Street, formerly the Elm Street Church. Pastor Steve has been involved in the Shannon Grant for as long as I can remember, and he does after-school sports programs, and he has weekend events to give kids something positive to do on the weekends. Those are the partners strictly out of Fitchburg. And
Now, my question to you, and I'm not trying to be a wise guy at all, does this make a big difference in the city of Pittsburgh with us doing what we're doing? Or is it top heavy? My other question is it top heavy? When I say top heavy, does management get most of the money, and then with economics, it goes down to the lower and there's hardly nothing left after? And everybody up above gets everything, but nothing down here, where it's supposed to actually go?
I mean, only $31,000 out of the $450 goes to the program director. So I certainly don't think that's excessive. In the police department, no one except patrolmen who are actually out doing the work on the street get any money. Like I, for example, am the program manager for the Shannon Grant. I have been for almost a decade, and I don't get anything for doing it. It's just part of my job. So I certainly don't think it's top heavy. And to address your first question, I think it does a tremendous amount of good. As I mentioned, we get drugs and guns off the street. The Junior Police Academy, we actually have an officer now on our force that went to the first Junior Police Academy as a teenager. And I think those positive interactions with police officers certainly shaped his desire to join the profession, which in today's day and age, we can take all the good people that want to join the profession.
Council Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for sharing that story. That's really terrific to hear. It's, we can put all the data out there that we want, but the stories really are very emblematic of the program. So that's wonderful to hear. I just want to echo the sentiments of the gentlelady from Buttell Street who complimented you and your department earlier on the work that you do to get these grants. That's not something that everybody does that, and your department consistently goes out and seeks these extra funds to extra resources for the city of Fitchburg. So I just want to thank you for that and yield the floor. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention our grant writer, Christy Fritcher, when you mentioned the grants we get. She's a tremendous asset to not only the department, but the city. And it's her hours of work that get us a lot of these grants. So I'd like to mention her.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve 2624. Any objections? Seeing none, it passes.
Thank you, councilors.
Thank you.
That's the new camera.
01924, order that the City of Fitchburg approves the expenditure, hereby appropriates a transfer, that the City of Fitchburg hereby appropriates and transfers the sum of $350,000 from available funds to the stabilization fund. Councilors, this is the normal tranche that we have been approving for 10 years now.
Mr.
Motion to
President,
approve?
can we take 19, 21, 20, and 21 altogether?
If the committee isn't objecting to that, I won't have a problem with that.
I mean, if you want to explain it to the public, you can.
Well,
No aggression.
1924 is to put $350,000 into the city stabilization fund. This is to maintain the DOR recommended 5% minimum of our total operating budget outside of the enterprise funds. We've been doing this for the last 10 years. It's necessary. And the stabilization fund, for those who don't know, is a reserve account that requires 2/3 of approval from the council, subject to the mayor's request to appropriate. It's basically for major emergencies and one-time occurrences. It's a safety net. $250,000, this is 02024, is for $250,000 from available funds to other post-employment benefits trust fund, OPEB, that is our health insurance liability. This trust fund was created in 2012 with the urging of the City Council at the time and approved by the former Mayor Lisa Wong. This has been also a number we have put in since then to have it there to go against our massive liability, which is unfunded, which is probably north of 130, 140 million. Unlike pensions, the state has no law dictating to municipalities when they must fully fund this. So what we decided to do 10 years ago was create this trust fund and just put some money away as much as we can every year. It's not a lot in there. There's probably about $2.5 million, but it signals to the bonding agencies and the creditors that we are at least taking it seriously and we're thinking about it, because most communities in this Commonwealth don't even have this. So it's just putting money away for future health insurance debt. And then lastly, 21-24 is $500,000 to stabilization. This $500,000, if you recall, is also necessary to pay for the future debt service costs we will incur in our future budgets for the Crocker School project and the library project. So the thought was at the time, put the money away now, and then we take it out later when the budget goes up, while still maintaining the 5%, which is why the 350 is in there also. So we don't want to eat into the 350. So this is all stuff we've already approved before, and is always the first three things to come out of free cash.
Motion to approve.
Oh, one question for the chair.
Yes, sir.
And for Jackie, and I'll make it very well known. Jackie and I talked today, I want to make it clear. If we have any extra money in free cash, instead of saying to make a wish, Christmas gift wish, if we have enough and we could put extra money in here on these three items, I would prefer to see that, and some of the lists that people want to really think hard about. So, because it's not Christmas every day. But this is more important, and I think, especially for the next 3 years on the 500,000, because we were told it's going to be very, very tight on the 500,000. Remember when Kelvin looked at the pink and green and yellow paper? So I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page, I hope, and that we really think about the three items here. You won't get no complaints from me on those three items. He made a motion, I second it.
A motion made and seconded to approve 019, 020, and 021. There are no objections. All three orders are approved. Next, 2224 order. The City of Fitchburg appropriates the sum of $500,000 to be charged against available funds and credit to the following Department of Public Works snow and ice accounts: equipment rental, $100,000; salt, $400,000. Commissioner Erickson.
Thank you. So this request before you tonight is for an appropriation for $400,000 to salt and $100,000 to equipment rental. We anticipate spending an average amount of snow and ice funding this year, and this $500,000 transfer would get us to approximately where our average spend rate is for every year. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Council Boschman.
I had a question.
Yep.
Nick, on the salt. I was talking to Jackie again on the salt. I noticed that I was driving up and down the streets, and I said, geez. I looked, and I said, is there something wrong with the machine with they push the salt in, they're supposed to spread it like a spreader? Because when I looked at it, driving up and down a lot of the streets in Fitchburg, I just seen a big line like this. Nothing on the side, but a big straight line going up the road. And I said, gee, and it looked like to me, but I'm not an expert and I'm not trying to micromanage. I said, geez, we're probably wasting a lot of salt because it's not coming out the proper way. Like if you were feeding your lawn, you wouldn't have a strip. You just spreads it out properly and you get everywhere. But here, it's just, if you drove up and down a lot of the streets, it was really heavy in the middle and nothing on the sides. Nothing at all. And I mean heavy.
So is that everywhere in the city?
Mostly everywhere, especially in my ward it was. I know you're trying to keep me pleased, but...
So it's not like we have one single salt or sander that goes out and spreads out sand. We've got, typically on average, DPW itself has a number of pieces of equipment that spread salt and sand, and then we have contractors that do the same. So each truck has its own spreader. Some are working better than others. DPW has a lot of equipment that's older and not functioning very well. And oftentimes during a storm, spreaders break down and malfunction. I can't guarantee that all of our spreaders are working 100% because a lot of them are older than I am, and that's something that we need to work on improving. Our mechanics do the best that they can to maintain the equipment that we have right now.
No, I just thought I'd ask because they said, you know, when I said that 400,000, I said, wow, spending a lot of money on salt.
Yeah, and just for comparison, I've got some figures with me. So last year we spent $76.51 per ton on salt. We bought 7,291 tons at an approximate cost of $558,000. Out of that, we used 5,056 tons of salt, and we had 2,235 tons remaining in the shed at the beginning of this season. So far this year, we've bought 4,055 tons at a cost of approximately $275,000, but salt is a little bit cheaper this year at $67.82 per ton. So right now we're tracking at a higher than average spend rate on salt. So if we continue at this rate, we'll end up using more salt than we did last year. But on average so far, we've had a lot of colder temperature days than we did last year. So a lot of thawing during the day and then colder temperatures at night, which create ice and the need to put down more salt. We've also had a lot of extended duration storm events, which cause us to use more salt over the duration of the storm. And we're here only in February, so we've got another 2 months, theoretically, of needing to put salt down on the road. So I think if we're not able to fund the full $400,000 tonight, then I could be coming back before you before the end of the season asking for more.
I'm making a motion to accept.
I wanted to say something.
Go ahead.
Does anybody else have anything to say?
No, quick question.
Council Cruz, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I get a lot from constituents who insist that we pre-treat. Is that what this is for here, the salt, or do we have something special that we pre-treat the roads with?
So we use the same salt for pre-treating as we do for treatment throughout the storm. So this would be for pre-treating, and we do pre-treat ahead of storms. Typically we'll pre-treat, then we'll plow, and then we'll treat at the end. Sometimes our contractors don't necessarily follow that, and that's something that we constantly struggle to follow through with. But yes, the more that we pre-treat, the more salt that we use, and the more that we spend on salt because of that.
So ultimately, the salt makes a big difference during the storms from sliding around and accidents and things of that nature.
Right, especially during that first part of the storm where it gets really slippery really fast.
Thank you. I yield the floor.
Do we not buy this in advance, too? This is all not necessarily going to maybe used for this winter, because we store it, right?
Yeah, we store it in the shed. The shed only has a certain amount of capacity. I think it's roughly 8,000 tons. But throughout the duration of a couple of storms, we'll go through the entire shed. So we'll need to replenish that.
Yeah, there was a comment made by one of the residents during public comment about this transfer. We have spent about a little over $1 million on average over the last 10 years on winter. Some years have been less, some years have been more. Mm-hmm. This transfer request is something that the city has done for 50 or 60 years straight, other than 3 years in the prior administration, FY 21, 2, and 3. Last fiscal year's budget, there was a lot of discussion and comments made to the public that the budget is weak because we didn't fully fund our snow and ice account, which is devoid of city's history. We've always funded it this way. The reason why we did it all up front those 3 years is because we had ample free cash due to good budgetary practices where we wanted to fund it all up front. And then a little pesky thing called the pandemic happened, and we had to go back to doing what we were doing the 50 years prior. No big deal. No alarm bells, but the public was led to believe that, oh my God, we're in trouble. So as you can see by tonight, we're not in trouble. This is what we've done for 60 years. And we do it this way because we're allowed to deficit spend this per the state law. We don't want to deficit spend. We never have deficit spent, but that's why we do this. And for those who don't like this practice, then you need to come up with $600,000 to cut from the budget, which I never see anybody do. Well, correction, I have, but they're not practical. So,
Just to add to that, so going back through the FY 2009 timeframe, our average snow and ice spend is $1,148,758.73. So assuming that we spend all of what's been appropriated already, plus this additional $500,000, that'll put us at roughly $1,050,000, which is still below that average spend rate for at least the last number of fiscal years.
yeah, because I also see here that in the Status C report that the auditor was kind enough to provide me, we've already spent $508,000 over the budget of, I'm sorry, we've spent about $652,000 out of a budget of $550. So we're already over budget by about $80,000. So we have to transfer something out of free cash to cover the difference. For those who may question why the amount, well, because of history, of what we intend to spend likely, and knowing this winter, who the heck knows? We could be getting snow in late April. It's not out of the realm of possibility. Whatever doesn't get spent from these accounts, if we appropriate the $500,000, or I'm sorry, the 500,000, and we don't use it, it just closes to free cash. So it's what we've always done, and it's not a poor practice. So this is just the usual standard. And I also wanted to add quickly also that the reason why also that it's done this way is because of the variability and uncertainty of our winters. A lot of mayors in the past would not want to front the money up front and tie up the rest of the budget, because what if they didn't need to up front? Sure, it comes free cash, but they can't use it for a year. So this was more strategic too. Let's put $550,000 in and then see what kind of winter we get. And if we don't need all that money, then I shouldn't have tied up the rest of the budget by putting it in up front. Right. So that's the strategy that I'm privy to from 2 prior administrations and beyond. So any other comments?
Yeah, one question.
Councilor Boschman?
We do put sand too, right? We use sand too.
So we have different zones throughout the city. The flatter areas of the city, we try to put down salt only. That means less cleanup in the springtime for street sweeping, catch basin cleaning, et cetera. For the hilly areas, we still run a mix. And then if we run low on salt, we run a mix to make that salt go a little further. So we had that really extended duration storm back in early January. Our salt shed started to get low after that, and we had to run a heavier sand mix because sand is easier to get delivered than salt. Our suppliers sometimes get backed up, and it takes a couple of weeks to get enough deliveries to actually make it through a storm or a couple storms. So I guess that's the long answer to your question.
No, I understand. I got no complaints about that. I agree with you. I look at Federal Street, and that's a steep hill, and once you go down Federal Street, there's no stopping you but the river. So,
I mean, I'd like to switch to all salt eventually, but we need to have some different equipment in order to do that. One of those pieces of equipment would be a sprayer truck, so we can pre-treat with a brine, which I think would help us with our operations.
yeah.
I want to also close just by thanking you and your department. You guys get so much mud slung at you. Pardon the pun, and we see it every day from people who just expect things to happen a certain way and at a certain time, and it doesn't work that way. There are mitigating factors across the board. I don't even like saying about short-staffedness or staffed or what have you. Whether you have 50 trucks or 30, it's not an easy job, especially in this climate and in this terrain we have where some of these hills are massive. Mm-hmm. So thank you very much, and please pass it on to your employees and, if you can, the private contractors. Because as we get a taste of, like last night, for example, there was a water main break. Mm-hmm. These guys were in 15-degree weather last night at 12 o'clock at night fixing a pipe. Things that people don't see, don't hear, but they complain when they have to pay $25 a month for water.
Yeah, last night was
So-
brutally cold, so those guys worked really hard and did
Yes.
an excellent job.
So thank you, and continue to do the job as best as you can under the circumstances.
Thank you.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve 2224. Any discussion? There are no objections, it's approved. 2324, order that there be and hereby is appropriated the sum of $400,000 to be charged against available funds and credited to DPW admin, engineering expenses, stormwater contract services.
So this is an item that long-term we need to find a better strategy to fund our stormwater operations and maintenance. Historically, we've been funding it through free cash appropriations. Back in 2017, the EPA issued us a new stormwater permit, and it increased the burden on the city exponentially. So we've been funding the requirements of this new MS4 permit through free cash appropriations. And I'm here before you tonight to ask that we continue to do that for now. But at some point, we're going to need to fund this in a more sustainable way, either by implementing some sort of a stormwater fee or by putting it in as a line item in the annual fiscal budget. But this money is used to comply with the requirements of the city's stormwater permit through the EPA. So we use it to hire consultants to help us with a lot of the inspection and maintenance and reporting requirements, dry weather outfall inspections, catchment area investigations, which is where you start at an outfall and then investigate the entire drainage area upstream to make sure there's no illicit connections or anything like that, GIS mapping of the stormwater system, and then, as I mentioned, various studies and reports that are required as part of our permit. So that's what this $400,000 will be used for if approved tonight.
Okay, so committee members, I just want to get out front in this and just say, please, let's not get into a discussion of how we fund this in the future. That's a budget discussion, and that's not what we're discussing here tonight. The reason we're here tonight is because it's not in the budget. There were options presented to this council many years ago about what the potential options are to fund this, none of which are palatable to any of us, in my opinion, because they invariably lead back to the ratepayer. But it's up to the administration to come up with a solution. This has been what the prior administration has been doing to at least show some kind of semblance of paying attention to this unfunded mandate from the feds. And I believe the cost is probably north of $2 million at this point to do it. Well, it was 1.6 years ago.
Yeah, 1.6 was the number that we came up with during the analysis in 2016. Everything's more expensive nowadays, so that cost is probably closer to $2 million annually.
So this $400,000, ladies and gentlemen, is another one of those free cash appropriations like the three we've already done. That's almost a given off the top, right when you get the certification. This is a guarantee. And as we all know, to put it in the budget instead requires us to rob from somewhere else to do that. And in this case, and I know, Counselor, you've been advocating this or talking about what do we do in the future. You know, the only methods that have been provided to us about how we do this is either we keep doing it the way we're doing it, which is the bare minimum, we fund it in the budget by taking from somewhere else, or we have a new revenue stream that covers this cost. And the question is, how do we arrive at that? And how does that get equally and fairly distributed to the public? Because, you know, there's businesses involved, residents involved, everybody. So this is the usual 400,000 tranche that we've been approving for years.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve 2324. Any discussion on the motion? If there are no objections, it passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. 2424, order that there be and hereby is appropriated the sum of $152,000 to be charged against available funds and credited to the following accounts: library personal services, $150,000, employee benefits, other, $2,000. So, councilors, you will have in front of you, provided to us this evening by HR Director Davis, the actual contract amendments. This was not in the email we got yesterday. It was just the appendix and the cover letter This is the meat in between the bread. So I know we just got it, but Ms. Davis, if you'd like to say anything?
Yep, absolutely. So this is for the Fitchburg Public Library Staff Association collective bargaining agreement, and it covers the period from July 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2025. For those of you who have been involved with other contracts, I think you know that we've taken great pride in the work that we put into these contracts to help us to succeed in attracting and retaining our employees. This particular group is the last that we really needed to do a significant rearrangement of the wage matrix. And I'm happy to say that we were able to do that. The cost of living adjustments that are associated with this are a 0.12. Certainly, a lot of the cost that is associated with this is for the restructuring of the matrix. What this has done is to put us in a very competitive range with other municipalities, in particular our sister city of Leominster. We looked at other municipalities within a logical mileage radius, and so that's where this puts us with this particular contract. I think this, like I said, certainly there really isn't anything huge in terms of any changes to the contract or anything that goes along with it. Most of this is really just housekeeping in addition to that, the major restructuring. This particular group, like all, certainly has been, it's been quite a while since any kind of restructuring has been done on their wage matrix. So.
Just quickly, sorry, Ms. Davis, on the first page of this, it says this contract, unless otherwise indicated, shall be effective from July 1st, 2023, and shall remain in full force and effect up to and including June 30th, 2026. Why? So does that mean the 2025 year of the 2%? Is that also for 26?
This is for. Is there a typo?
Or part of 26?
It's right here.
Right, it goes through June 30th of 2025. We're wondering if that should say 2026.
That should say 2026.
Thank you.
June
Thank
30th,
you.
2026.
Credit to the auditor, she picked up on that.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Auditor.
Just make a note, councilors, that the first paragraph of this document should read from July 2023 through June 30th of 2026, because.
Which it does.
Okay.
Second paragraph, right? Second paragraph, right?
First paragraph. First paragraph. Second paragraph actually says June 30th, 2026.
Yeah.
It does.
So same as that. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Questions, Councilor Cruz?
I thought it was cracking up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just kind of one question, concern. In the past, we've been brought this matrix, and this is the way we do our housekeeping, and it's just bringing everything up to speed.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had, it's been used to jump up multiple levels at a time. You know what I mean? And we've seen that in multiple departments. I personally raised some issues with it at the last budget hearing. Mm-hmm. Are there any examples in this particular case? So we just kind of got it where individuals bumped up 2-3 points, because raising by 2% is one thing. That's fine.
Right.
If somebody is introduced at another 8, 9, 10% right off the bat, then I have concerns.
There are. Let me see. There are some employees that definitely had larger increase percentages due to the restructuring of this. Much like some other contracts that we did that with, where we have difficulty hiring or retaining people in a position. So yes, there are some people that definitely do have a significant increase.
Mm-hmm. Would you say 5 or more, more than 5?
And it could be anywhere from 11% up to 28, 29%. But keeping in mind, there has not been any kind of significant movement or this being addressed as we have with other groups. You know, recently we did the same thing with the DPW. We needed to do that because we needed to attract and retain people. And this group had not been, that had not happened in quite some time.
Okay, so when you say quite some time, less than a decade, more than a decade?
Oh, definitely more than a decade. Right. Absolutely. This group in particular, and I wasn't here more than a decade ago, but I will say, from what I know, this particular group, like others, they took a large hit during the budget crisis, and I'm not sure to what degree that came back, honestly, for them. But I honestly, I don't want to comment on anything. I don't have the facts for. I just. No, sorry.
That's fine. I completely understand, and I do know, and I really admire the people at the library, and I think they do a terrific job, and they've absolutely earned what they're getting. I just want to go on record and say that I hope that things are starting to stabilize, and we won't have to have this in the future where we need to make these large increases.
Oh, we definitely, honestly, I cannot anticipate, just like I've said with the other contracts, we have not. I also want, just to keep in mind, librarians, all those positions, they're required to have a master's degree. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're just not going to find somebody for 50 grand easily, or you might find them, but you're not going to keep them. And our focus is certainly to keep, to keep good employees here. We don't want to go through a process of bringing somebody in, having them, contribute everything, to their position and to the library, and then have them leave, which we've had, because they're going to get, even if it was $5,000 more up the road. That's what was happening. Or we've, in the last 3 years, we've put four job offers to librarians that turned it down strictly because of the salary. Mm-hmm. So, and these positions are you want to keep people in there. The library is a great resource, and we need to make sure, whether it is with this group or others, when we have the financial ability to do so, we need to be able to compensate people for the job that they do. In any union, any employee needs to be compensated. And again, certainly I take that seriously. We need to be able to balance that and do so, definitely in a fiscally responsible nature. All this is bringing these people up to where they should be.
Thank you. No, I think that's a valid argument. I think it's completely valid, and I'm in support of this. I think the library has really sacrificed a lot over the years for this city, and I'm in full support of them getting it. I mean, even when you look at the employee benefits that decrease, it's $2,000 in the grand scheme of our budget. Right. We can do that. So
yeah, out of the there are 15 part-time people, mm-hmm. and 7 full-time. Mm-hmm. So. I think one of the things that had happened with this particular group, as they needed to cut people, but they still want to retain services, I think that's how they ended up picking up probably more part-time people. Mm-hmm. So they're not benefited.
Right. And there's a considerable amount of, with the library in particular, depending on what they can do in Massachusetts depends on the amount of full-time employees that they have. I don't think people realize that, if they want to be a part of a certain association, or you can rent out books from another town, or you can borrow, you can be part of the entire organization is dependent upon what they have for full-time employees and how they're rated. So, like I said, I'm in full support, and I yield the floor.
Thank you. Councilor Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say that to sort of reiterate that this contract pays a competitive wage, so it's going to attract people to these positions, and then those people will more likely stay much longer. Yeah. And that's the purpose of this, right?
Yes, absolutely. One of the librarians we hired recently, I'm sorry, she moved here from Wisconsin. Another one that we hired came here from Syracuse. That's what happens with these jobs. And we want those people to come here and to stay here.
Okay, thank you.
Oh.
Council Boschman.
Question. On your chart that you gave me yesterday or today, right? Today, I think.
No, that was yesterday.
Oh, yesterday?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yesterday. I was looking this over. You go over here on the first page, librarian supervisor. Now, is that the head person that takes care of everybody?
That what?
Is this, that person is like, what's her name? What was
It's not Director Hinkle.
Is they have one?
No, that's Deb Hinkle. She's a library director. No, so this is the person that we have here, the public services supervisor. These titles are a little misleading. Is Ashley Kenny, for example. We don't have an assistant director. The way the matrix is set up is, if in fact we had an assistant director, that's where they would fall, would be grade 9. But no, Deb is the director who's non-union.
She's non-union?
Correct.
She makes a compatible wage compared to some of the other places. According to here, the budget of last year, she gets $108,500. 108.5. As a matter of fact, I think she might be ahead of some of the areas around here. I'm all in favor of raises, but I think what I get upset about, I think we seem to forget that if you were paying, your hands wouldn't go all the way down. They would go so far, and you'd be saying that's all we can afford. We think here in the city of Fitchburg, it's an endless check. This Paul Boschman's going to keep on writing the check. The wages here is $108,000 according to this what I have in front of me right now. The head clerk part-time is $28,000. I don't know what the 5 full-time or 4 full-time, 4 part-time, because we don't have it broken down, but they make almost $365,000 total, $365,000. But if we had it broke down, we could find out if we're competitive. We don't know. I don't know, except for the wages that you got here, that you're telling me. And now you changed it because I just got this tonight, and it's entirely different. I didn't even understand it. I would ask you questions, but...
Let me clarify. Nothing's different. Nothing's changed. The issue is that my packet of information was left off the agenda for February 6th. We corrected that. Auditor Cronin sent everything out for me yesterday. Then I made an error, and I put the wrong attachment, and the attachment didn't have the MOA, which spells out the details of what got changed in the collective bargaining agreement. Nothing changed. This document is just, again, says they get a 0, 1, 2 for those 3 years, and then it talks about housekeeping and language changes. So nothing changed. I do understand. I can tell you, I can certainly provide information to you if you want to see the cities and towns that we looked at and individual employees and where they are, for salary, for their salary.
Yeah. No, I don't know, Mr. Chair. I'd like to know if that could be, if we could correct it, because I really get puzzled when I see it all at once, when I read the book, the budget book, and it says 8 people and you get $396,000, and we don't know what they're actually making. You just get a round number, and you got to figure out, geez, well, he's got part-time, and this one's full-time. You got 4 full-time and 4 part-time. And then I don't know if they're compatible. It's almost like we don't know. I don't know. When you're telling me that. But as a standpoint, I may say $46,000 is a lot of money for somebody making it a library right now. It's a lot more than some people out there make to me. You know what I'm saying? I'm just using that for now. I'm just throwing that number out.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Go ahead.
No,
But I like to know. I personally like to know. It was the same thing when it was something else they brought up. We didn't have it broke down far enough. It was like we were hiding it in the budget. It was over here, then you get a look over here, and then you look over here, then you add it up and you say, oh my God, they're making a lot more than what we're saying they're making. You know what I'm saying? With this stipend and that stipend and that stipend and this stipend and that stipend, you add it all up, it's not 2%, it ended up to being 7% raises because they get the stipend raised with additional more money for the stipends. And that's my argument. I'm tight. I'm not going to dispute the fact that I am tight. And I don't mind paying. If I see results, I don't mind paying. When I don't see results, then Paul says something. Because if Paul's saying something, the people out there are saying something. So Paul can't be that far off. But I don't understand. When I look at that, and I'm trying to compare it to this, and I call up Leominster today, and I said, geez, they told me the head supervisor is getting $100 and some odd thousand. And I look at that, we're already paying $100 and some odd $1,000. We're already ahead of Leominster on some of the items. And Leominster's got a lot more money than I have. And they seem to be more tighter than what we are. That's my problems. We want to look good. We want to feel good, councilors. We want to feel good. That's what we want to be. And I know the man to the right is going to say, we're always talking about Leominster. But I'm just giving that for an example. I like to have a breakdown of how much a year, not per hour. I can figure that out, 40 hours a week. But I like to have a breakdown. That's what I like to have. All right.
So
I yield the floor.
Councilor Cruz, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just briefly, just to touch on something that the gentleman from Ward 2 mentioned about that salary. I was on the Library Board of Trustees for a little while when we were searching for our new library director. And that salary was very much needed to attract the quality of the individual that we ended up getting in Director Hinkle. And I think it's money well spent, especially now when we're in a very big transition period for the city of Fitchburg and for the library. We're moving to a full renovation of that library for state-of-the-art facility. We needed an individual capable of this really monumental transition. So I think it's important that we got to that point and we hired the right person. And I yield the floor. Thank you.
President Zarella?
I'd just like to note, we're spending a fair amount of time talking about the salary of the one person in the library whose pay is not affected by what's in front of us this evening. So I make a motion that we approve.
Can I have...
I'll withdraw.
Sir, thank you. So a lot has been said, and first I want to say that Councilor Cruz's concerns are absolutely warranted. They make perfect sense. It's called in the finance world sticker shock. Because when you defer many, many times and then you get caught up, it's a sticker shock. It's a shock to the system of what you see as a result of that deference. So he is absolutely correct in being concerned that this big hit we've taken the last budget cycle with all the other union contracts and non-union raises as well because of the adjustments, that this one being the last one of that whole tranche can be hard to stomach for a lot of people. And it no doubt has put a strain on the budget. The key factor, though, in this is that when we make these kinds of decisions, we have to be cognizant of the history, of the context. I believe I'm the only councilor here who served in 08, 9, 10, 11, and 12. The dark years of the city, if you will, where the word surplus was like finding a pot of gold with a leprechaun on it. We didn't know what surplus was back then. I remember in those meetings, the unions begrudgingly took zero after zero after zero after zero. I know. Lisa Wong was at war with those unions. And the unions were not understanding of they were understanding of the situation. But I don't know of many people who can go several years with no increase at all. But a lot of our employees did 10 years ago. And as a result of that Great Recession and other factors, now that we have gotten into a more comfortable financial situation where we don't have 10 grand in the bank anymore, we're catching up for, I wouldn't even call them the sins of our past. They weren't sins. It was the economic conditions at the time. It's a balancing act. When do you do this? Do you phase it in? Do you do it all at once? Unfortunately, when it comes to the public sector and the private sector with respect to employee retention, more often than not, you got to do it all at once. Because we live in the current times, and as was stated earlier, someone is not going to go work here if the town next door or an area closer to here pays 5, 10, 15% more. It's called market rate forces. The market dictates everything. Commissioner Erickson told us a few weeks ago that water and wastewater are fully staffed now. Do we all recall what he was telling us a year and a half ago about those two departments? They were like half-staffed. The impacts of the contract negotiations had a significant benefit on us having an easier time hiring people, retaining them, which ultimately benefits the taxpayer because the services improve when you have a full staff. So, Councilor Cruz is absolutely right, though, about the concern, because if it gets that high, something's got to give. But then it's, like I said, it's a balancing act. When do you pull the trigger? When do you do it? And we've been late to the party, and we've suffered. And now we're getting caught up. And this is the end of it. So like him, I don't expect to see changes of this magnitude for a very long time. Or if there are to be changes, what we cannot do is wait. That's when you do it incrementally and slowly. Fitchburg has a storied history of doing nothing for 30 years, and then we do it all at once. Look at the sewer separation project. It's because of partly our fault. We deferred that. Now everyone had a 70% increase in their bill. We should be methodical and timely with our increases going forward. And so I, like he, don't hope to expect to see that jump in the future. But I understand why it's happened. To my colleague from Ward 2's point, he looks at this through the prism of what does the average John and Jane Q taxpayer in our city, what do they make? What do they see for increases? What can they afford to pay out of their pocket to fund these salaries? And it's also a valid point. Again, it's difficult to balance between that perception and reality and what we face with as a city. This is not a question of we're at market rate and we're jumping it up by 30%. I would certainly hope not. But I understand his point. It's a lot to a lot of people. You mentioned someone 25%. To the layperson, to me, to all of us, I think, we're not accustomed to a 25% increase. It's not a cost adjustment as a salary increase. It's steps. They're getting promoted, if you will, or they're getting adjusted to what the market rate is for where they are currently. So while it is an increase, I want to say that it's not like we just gave them a 25% bonus. We're keeping them on par with everyone else because we're late to the party. And unfortunately, that comes with it a big price tag. No one wants to see that at once, but that is the rationale behind it. So, in closing, I have my direct report and my private sector job. He's the director, he's the VP of operations, of which the finance group is a part of it, my department. He has 8 employees. He makes $230,000 a year. Private sector. Now, he doesn't get a pension, and he doesn't get the health benefits that this city gives its employees. But that has been the long-held argument of why the public sector gets those stipends and benefits you mentioned. Because in the private sector, they don't get any of that stuff. They just get a gigantically larger salary. So, lastly, to be fair to the other unions, or to be fair, not to the other unions, to the library union, and I sometimes hate using the word fair, but in this case it applies. We've already approved unanimously as a council all the other adjustments to get us to this point. To then say no to this, the last one, no offense, counselors, in my experience, the moment we approve the first one, we kind of set the stone in place of having to approve the rest of them. You can't pick and choose what unions to. I know he may disagree and say, yes, you can, but again, you can't say to the DPW, sure, we'll make you market rate. Police, nah. What message does that send? You do it for all or you do it for none.
Exactly.
And in the case of me with my constituents, some of them have said, yes, it's exorbitant. But when you explain to them that we had departments that were hemorrhaging bodies because we didn't pay them what other towns and communities did, it's like the private sector. If I know there's a company 5 minutes away from me that's going to pay me $50,000 more to the same amount of work, what do you think I'm going to do? It applies everywhere. So yes, it's a lot, but it's necessary for us to maintain the levels that we need to maintain. To your point, Counselor, about getting the information about, I mean, are we even allowed to see employee by employee what they make?
Well, it's public record. I mean, their salary is
right?
public record.
So
what I would say is I could certainly, give you that information. What I don't have, and we've never really done that, but I wish I had, is to say, yeah, they might be getting a 23%, increase or an adjustment to make them whole. Well, we don't know what percentage they haven't gotten over how many years and where so
that's why
I don't have those numbers because we don't figure that out. What we do is
that's why these constant comparisons to Leominster, thinking of another word, to represent heaven. Right. Why we always compare ourselves to them. To your point, Counselor, whatever you saw in their budget, I don't know anything about the employee in that job. I don't know what their age is, what their years of experience is, what their credentials are, what their union contract calls for. I have no idea. So it's not wrong to compare us to other communities of comparable size, but we need to be careful when we do that because there are other factors at work here that we do not see nor will we ever see. So we have to be careful and cautious with those comparisons.
We do take into consideration, again, the mileage radius, because that is going to affect, obviously, where somebody goes if they're willing to commute. The director's from Worcester. So, I mean, people drive from different places, not that that's far, but, we looked at Shrewsbury, Holden, Chelmsford, Framingham, I can't remember what other cities, but we looked at Beverly. We looked at other municipalities as well.
One final thing, I apologize, Council. I've been going a long time here, but again, it's critical. I think Councilor Cruz broached upon it in terms of the State Library Board of Commissioners, or trustees. Yep. Is it trustees or commissioners?
Well, there's the MBLC and there's the library board. There's a book.
Okay, the MBLC, the governing body in the state that oversees the library.
It's the MBLC.
Okay. There is a threshold that cities and towns must meet in their budgets in order to qualify for annual state funding. We saw this during the 08 to 12 issue when I was chair of finance. When we reduced the library by 40%, the state sent us a letter the next week saying you are now cut off.
They lose some kind of certification.
They lost their certification.
So hours, staff,
The certification is key. Without the certification, we don't get the state funding, which means we don't get our tax dollars back to our community, and the public got hurt, obviously, because the hours were significantly reduced. I think we only had 20 hours a week open instead of 40 plus. The point I'm trying to make is to what Councilor Cruz was saying is there's other factors at work here in terms of assessing the library specifically in terms of what their budget is, because if we don't keep pace with what the MLBC says is the standard, and that standard is based on other communities, we will lose that funding, which a long time ago was around $75,000. I don't know what it is today. Maybe I can find it in the Status E. I'll look for it tomorrow. But if we don't have that minimum level of budget that they set, we lose funding. So we have to be cognizant of that as well. And if you have employee salaries significantly lower than our neighbors, That doesn't bode well for meeting that threshold. So
I
we've
do
set 'em-
want you to just one quick thing on my. We do, as you know, in negotiations, whether with this or any other union, that is taken very seriously. What we are spending and what we're spending it for. And again, I do think that there's a balance between we need to pay employees what they should be paid, but we also need to do it, fairly. We want people to be, smartly. We want people, again, to come here and stay here and be dedicated to Fitchburg. And I think that this goes a long way toward helping that. So, but certainly understood the concern. You won't see me anytime soon for this kind of thing. So,
Councilor Zarella.
I just wanted to echo and emphasize one particular point, because this is now my 7th year on the council, and I feel like every term I've said this in one occasion or another, that the story of my time on the council has really all centered around dealing with the consequences of times when we kicked the can down the road long before my tenure. And now we are finally at a place, certainly we are now at a place with the contracts, and we're finally at a place with most other things in the city where we either are finally caught up or we are within shouting distance of being caught up. And that's a really good feeling, to know that whoever is sitting in this seat 10, 20 years from now is not going to have to spend their term playing catch up and fixing problems that could have been avoided. So, yeah, I mean, like anyone else, I think, who's ever held this position or any political position, would I rather not vote for a large increase in spending? Sure. But it's necessary. And certainly for this in particular, the last thing we want is to have a brand new state-of-the-art library with, whatever staff we could scrape from the bottom of the barrel because we're not paying them enough to attract high quality. I think right now we have excellent people at the library. It's got to stay that way. So I'm strongly in support of this. And if there's no one else waiting to speak, I will make the motion.
Second.
Councilor Bushman has his hand up. Do you want to remove your
I'm willing to withdraw if Councilor Bushman wants to speak again.
Yeah, listen, I just want to make it very clear to you and to my fellow councilors. I wasn't picking on the head one. I was just giving that for an example. That's all I want to make sure.
That's understood. That's understood.
So it was just an example. And I don't want to be that I'm anti-union. I'm not anti-union. I'm pro-union.
Oh, I know that.
And, but, I just want to make sure we understand that out there in the real world, people are having a hard time, and in the city of Fitchburg. And when I read some of these things where people say the city's making $70,000 a year per person, I say, where are they finding this information? Everybody else makes around 40. And I said, where the heck are we going? And to top it all off, you keep on telling me how you want to bring people in. I have no problem paying them. But if you're going to make $100,000, make sure you live here in Fitchburg. That's all I have to say. And don't say you can't say because I found out we can. We can say they have to live here. That I read in the paper. Thank you.
And there would be many people that we wouldn't be able to employ, and their services and talent would be elsewhere. Although I do agree, I hear what you're saying. I think that that's important. So if I've got 2 qualified candidates and they're equally qualified, and one lives in Fitchburg, come on aboard. So I get that. And everybody's got a job to do, right? So I don't take offense to you talking about Deb's salary or anything. I mean, that's what we all have a job to do.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve 2424.
Thank you
There are
so
no
much.
objections? It's
No, I'm not
approved.
gonna object. I told you I was.
I didn't.
Thank you.
2524, order that the City of Fitchburg appropriates the sum of $12,000 from available funds crediting Treasurer Personal Services sick time buyback.
Evening.
Treasurer Cervantes.
Our longtime payroll and benefits manager recently announced her retirement at the end of May of this year. So this request for an appropriation of $12,000 would cover the sick time buyback that she's entitled to when she does retire.
Motion to approve.
Second.
On the motion. On the motion. I'll go with the motion.
Do you have questions?
No, I just got one thing to say. Try to talk.
Oh, wait, we haven't.
I withdraw my motion.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, you could have kept the motion, because I said on a motion.
Go ahead.
I was just going to tell you, try to talk her into staying. She does a good job. And I know her really good. She used to be my neighbor.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve 2524. If there are no objections, it is approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
2824, order that there being hereby is appropriated the sum of $82,000 to be charged against airport receipts reserved and credited to airport improvements. We have Airport Manager Kettle here. This is just an interdepartmental transfer from personal services to expenses. Would you have anything to say, sir?
Just one thing, thank you. Chair DiNatale and committee members. With respect to 028-24, the $82,000 is 1/5 of the $410,000 that we are going to get from a grant from MassDOT. As you all know, the runway was put in approximately 4.5 years ago. Since that time, it's seen 4 years of summers and winters and thousands of aircraft landing on it. So it's now consolidated. And now is the time to make the airport and the runway more safe. And this is all about safety. It's not about the money. If you look at the FAA regulations, it stipulates that any jets that fly into an airport with a runway longer than 5,001 feet must have grooves in it, because that provides the safety. So I would request, please, that you approve this appropriation.
So the airport is putting up $82,000 to get 410?
Yeah, 20%, 1/5.
And I just want to note that the airport's paying for this.
Yes.
Go ahead, Counselor.
I just want to say, you can say thank you to Jackie, because she's the one who set the record straight, because I was all ready to come after you tonight. Because she told me, because when I first got the first packet, it was coming from available funds, counselors, you know that. And she said, oh, no, they're paying for it. I said, okay, they made my day.
Councillor Boschman, I saw free cash, so I wanted some of it. That's why it went in like that. So thank you.
Motion to approve?
And a second.
Motion made and seconded to approve. There are no objections. It is approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
2924, order that the City of Fitchburg hereby approves the expenditure of funds in the amount of $18,000 allocated by Fitchburg State University through Mass Development's Transformative Development Initiative Creative Cities program to support Fitchburg's cultural initiatives, including marketing, program activation, pop-up events, and Mill Street venue activation.
Good evening, councilors. So this is a grant that would come to the city. It actually ultimately came from the Barr Foundation through Mass Development, then to Fitchburg State University, and now to us. So this would be used basically for marketing, for events, things like First Thursdays, focused on the cultural, on the what we hope to be the cultural district soon. So I'm using that term a little bit aspirationally. But our downtown district.
Councilor Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a real quick question. Who would be in charge of sort of the allocation of this funds throughout?
My department would be in charge of it.
Your department. And so would this be the, you mentioned First Thursday, so I think of the downtown coordinator that we sometimes, that we usually fund through community development block grants. Will they sort of be overseeing this, or?
Yes, it is likely that this will go into our FY25 budget for that type of purpose.
Okay. And would this be available to fund that position at all, or would this strictly needs to be used for the cultural initiatives?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the last part.
Could we fund that position using this allocation, or would this need to go strictly to the cultural initiatives?
I think we can achieve both through this. So I think we can fund that position and achieve the marketing of the cultural initiatives through that position.
Okay. Thank you very much. I yield the floor.
Councilor Boschman.
You say we can achieve both? The downtown coordinator is going to get paid by what?
So what the counselor asked is do we, he asked an either or of funding the position or funding the marketing of the activities, and what I'm saying is that we can fund the position to then do the marketing of the activities.
All right. All right. I didn't understand it.
It's all right.
Speak up.
Any other questions?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve 2924. If there are no objections? Seeing none, it's approved. Thank you.
Very much.
2724, order that the City of Fitchburg appropriates and transfers the sum of $305,703.81 from available funds to receipts reserved opioid settlement funds. Auditor Cronin?
Yes, I can speak to this. These opioid funds were received in the prior fiscal year. The source of the funds is the nationwide settlement with companies like Johnson & Johnson, who were held responsible for part of the opioid epidemic. There was a technical correction on how to handle these funds, so they closed to free cash at the end of June. But because of the new laws, they're to be set aside in a separate fund and used for just this purpose. So this is a technical move to move it from free cash into its own fund. And any expenditures from these monies will come back before the council.
I make a motion we accept.
I have a quick question for the auditor.
Go ahead, Councilor Cruz.
Auditor Cronin, and who, once these funds are appropriated, which department would then be in charge of them?
Board of Health.
The health department?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I yield the floor.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve 2724. If there are no objections, it is approved.
Mr. Chair, may I respectfully request a brief recess before we finish our last item?
Absolutely. We'll give 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. We're going to adjourn for 5 minutes. Okay, we are back, and we're taking up the final order this evening before us, 00824. Order, the City of Fitchburg hereby appropriates and transfers the sum of $42,240 from Law Department Personal Services to Law Department expenses for the appointment of the city solicitor. Committee members, please note that the Legislative Affairs Committee meeting last week took this up and voted 3-2 against recommending that this be approved. So we are here this evening to take up the same matter, and whatever we do tonight will go to the February 20th council meeting as a whole to likely fully legislate and close the matter one way or the other. The mayor is here with Lisa Mead, who is the city solicitor. And Mayor, would you like to make any comments?
Sure. I have I've written information here that I can read. Thank you, councilors. I write this letter to share my considerations for regards to my appointment of Lisa Mead and Mead, Tellerman and Costa as the solicitor for the city of Fitchburg. As you are well aware, the legal issues which face our city in these times are often complicated and have major financial implications which often require timely communication and decision-making. Working with a partner and firm which includes diverse municipal experience and expansive in-house experience will provide the City of Fitchburg with sound, efficient, and timely legal advice and representation. This type of depth of knowledge and service will eventually lead to cost savings for the City of Fitchburg, which has been proven by experience with not only other communities that are represented by Lisa Mead and Mead, Tellerman and Costa, but of similar firms that specialize in municipal law with in-house counsel that vary in municipal specialties. With a budget approaching $200 million for a city of our size, it is becoming more difficult for a single solicitor to possess all the knowledge needed to properly represent a city of our scale and complexity, where a firm of in-house counsel that represent many facets of municipal law experience is quickly becoming the standard for cities and towns across the Commonwealth. That notwithstanding, Lisa Mead and Mead, Tellerman and Costa recognize that there's an additional value to immediate local counsel regarding code enforcement and health and safety related enforcement matters. And to that end, with my endorsement, have continued with Donna Pollack serving as the Assistant City Solicitor to handle these important local matters. Notwithstanding budget savings being realized and expected in our next fiscal year, but cost savings also arise in many forms. We see cost savings in the amount of time spent by department heads interacting with the solicitor and waiting on opinions or advice on important and time-sensitive matters. We see cost savings found in chairs of our land use boards, receiving advice in advance of or during a meeting so they are best equipped to handle difficult applications and make decisions which are least likely to lead to costly appeals and therefore reduce our overall litigation costs for the City of Fitchburg. We see cost savings found in the consolidation and organization of time our solicitor spends addressing the city needs with clearly communicated and consistent office hours. More tangible, long-term cost savings are realized in not carrying health insurance, pension, and other post-employee benefits for the city for the lifetime of individuals, even after such individuals have moved away from our employment. Our current fee agreement was carefully chosen for consideration of our new mayoral administration, multiple new department heads, and a solicitor team that is new to the representation of the City of Fitchburg. Careful review over time moving forward will ensure that we are balancing the many comprehensive legal needs with proper management of time and cost. Moving forward with a legal team with broad experience in all aspects of municipal law and who sees and has experience with the same challenges that the city of Fitchburg faces on a day-to-day basis as a regular part of their day-to-day practice, will help realize both long-term and tangible cost savings and provide the best and most responsive representation and benefit of the city of Fitchburg. We thank you for your attention and consideration to this matter and strongly support the transfer of funds from personal services to expenses. So what we are saying is that we no longer employ an employee in the position of personal services. So to clarify my intention, this means changing from a city employee where the taxpayers pay the benefits and pensions in perpetuity to contract services where we do not see those long-term costs. And it was referenced earlier, reference about transparency. And I would like to echo Councillor Van Huizenga's statements where he notes that, the previous situation was a situation where we did not see the itemized billing or the hours that were spent on the city of, for the city of Fitchburg when it came to personal services. With expenses and contract services, now we will see transparent and itemized billing for what is going on for the city of Fitchburg. This will provide the maximum amount of transparency that Fitchburg will see. In addition, no line items within the budget when it comes to the transparency within those line items, that expense budget, plans to be cut in any capacity. I'd like to close just with the statement that the legal needs of the city of Fitchburg are complicated and extensive. Fitchburg deserves effective legal counsel to ensure that we have protection from extensive litigation and our many building and grant-related projects are moving at an efficient and expeditious pace. To this end, I know that President Zarella has a proposal for discussion tonight, and we did discuss that proposal, and we are fully in agreement in the spirit of this proposal. How that detail works out, we're on board completely to work this out for the benefit of all of us in the city of Fitchburg. Thank you.
President Zarella.
Thank you. Yes, Vice President Van Huizenga and I did have a chance to meet with the mayor this afternoon. At the prior committee meeting, I expressed a number of concerns and, a lack of conviction that this is the proper course for the city to take. I can't say that those concerns are gone. However, having met with the mayor and also with the vice president, I feel that there is a willingness to work this out, and that is much appreciated. And I do feel that I'm actually going to pass around an ordinance amendment that I've drafted. It's obviously not for vote or consideration as such tonight, but just for the committee members to have an idea of what is being proposed. I remain skeptical. However, the department, I don't want to leave our department heads in the lurch in terms of their needs for contract approvals, further legal service, and so forth. And I do feel that if this ordinance amendment is passed in an expeditious manner by the council, that that will provide the necessary safeguards and the necessary legal fixes to allow us to give this a trial run. And frankly, now that I think about it, having looked over these changes, I think these changes would be good ones to make even if we weren't going this route, just because some of them reflect some long-needed cleanups. But again, we can talk about that when it's actually before us as an ordinance. So I will be provisionally supporting this move on a trial basis, and I would encourage the council to join me in that. And we'll see. You know, I said it years back when we were debating the very controversial marijuana ordinances and so forth. I said, you know, look, here are my concerns. I would be very happy to be proven wrong. And that is true here as well. I would be very happy to be proven wrong because, as I said at Legislative Affairs, I do think that this law firm is an excellent firm composed of excellent attorneys. That was never my concern. So I am hoping that working with them will prove to be both an effective and cost-effective option for the city. And if not, then I think those who have been on the council with me for a while will believe me when I say this. This proposed change is very carefully drafted to preserve our option to reconsider this if it proves unwise. And with that, I will yield the floor.
Councilor Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At the Legislative Affairs meeting, I expressed similar concerns that Councilor Zarella had expressed. Some of my concerns were retaining someone from outside of the city. Some of my concerns were retaining a firm. Most of those concerns have been addressed. And I think at this point, although I still believe that the contract as signed is not a valid contract, I would at least be willing to postpone a decision on whether to approve that transfer of funds and give an opportunity for the entire council to look at the amendments to the ordinances and see where that takes us. I yield the floor.
Councilor Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is obviously something that we just heard tonight. This was just proposed, this ordinance, so it's sort of complicates, you know, what I had initially prepared. But I do think it's worth noting and worth talking about a little bit and deliberating still. You know, I had initially sort of explored this during the budget hearing. I was for it then. I haven't changed my mind with the new administration. I think it's very valuable to explore a firm. Attorney Media, 15 attorneys total on staff?
16.
16, okay. I forgot to count you. So that's 16 attorneys just on that staff with an array of knowledge and expertise to address various municipal legal concerns. And that's something that we, in my opinion, we sorely missed in the last few years. And I just want to reiterate some numbers that I know I've brought up before, but it's worth mentioning. Because I know this is the Finance Committee, and the concerns for me have largely been financial and how this will affect the residents and the taxpayers. Before I get into that, though, I think the most important thing for us as a body and a city council as a whole and for the administration is to, and I credit you, President Zarella, for you know, meeting today with Vice President Van Hazinga and for trying to get us to the solution and getting this figured out, because ultimately, you know, we're in the middle of February and the residents of Fitchburg need legal representation. We're failing them if we can't address this. So it's very important for us to get to the bottom of this. So thank you, President Zarella. Just some of the numbers I do want to talk about really quickly. In FY21, an additional legal fees. This is not what we were paying the solicitor, which is a six-figure salary. There was an additional $131,000, $178,000. In additional legal fees between special counsel, labor negotiations, arbitration, things of that matter. In FY22, and I do admit this is a bit of an outlier, but it's worth noting. We spent over $1 million in damages and fees, legal fees, another $250,000, $226,439 in special counsel, another $86,000 in labor negotiations. We spent about $1.5 million in additional legal counsel that I still believe could have been avoided with an expansive firm that would have had a better understanding of what was needed at the time. I also want to compliment Vice President Hasinga for his advocacy during the Legislative Affairs meeting. It was a long meeting. I had the luxury of watching it from my couch, which made it easier. But I really think he put on quite the clinic of advocacy for this. He's a proponent of it as well. And what I didn't hear throughout that entire meeting was anyone having an issue with the firm itself or the representation that we would get. And I think that's maybe the most important thing, is if we understand that we're going to get adequate, even commendable legal service, then we should give the opportunity to explore it. And I agree that I think we're going to get increased transparency here, because we'll see these sort of billable hours, and we'll understand dollar for dollar, time for time, what we're getting for our money. It won't be I work about 25 hours, which is what was told to us by a previous administration, about 25 hours a week. How we would come to that conclusion, I don't know. It would just be, okay, that sounds good. But now we'll know exactly what we're getting, and I think that's important. So if my colleagues here on the Finance Committee, if you have no trepidations or reservation about Meade, Tellerman, and Costin legal services they can provide, ultimately, at the end of the day, the voters chose the current administration to make these difficult choices, and ultimately that administration is going to have to live with it, and so will we. But it's important to not only take into effect and be that check of a legislative body to the executive branch, but it's also important not to be obstructionary to the administration and to the individual who was voted to assume that role and to make these choices. So I'm not going to get in the way, and ultimately, if we're not going to get this big check at the end of the year, right? If there's needed additional appropriations, it can't be written without our consent. So much like you said, President Zarella, of seeing where this goes and giving it a bit of a, let's test it out, let's see. Why not? We're not going to get a bill at the end of the year that says, oh, we also got to pay this. If we need additional appropriations, they will have to come before us again and ask for them. So that's why I'm in support of this. I think it's the right decision. I'm willing to give it a go. And if it, blows up and we have to make some changes, then that's what we'll have to do. I yield the floor. Thank you.
So I will go. And I have quite a bit to say. I am very upset and disappointed in the actions of our president. As chair of Finance Committee, I wasn't consulted about any of this, that this meeting was taking place today, that we just got tossed to us is like a bargaining chip to pass this forward. So I'm disturbed that I wasn't included in any of this and that this was put on us right now. But it doesn't change my opinion or my vote. And as Mr. Zarella said, even if we don't support this transfer, this can still apply. So I don't consider that in my calculus. What I do consider as chair of Finance Committee is the following. It is true that the mayor of the city gets to choose who runs the legal department. No one disputes that. It's the manner in which the services are provided that we have a say in as a council. Because whether it's budget sessions or it's a transfer, we decide, not the mayor. That is what a check and balance is. We are representatives of the people also. Nowhere is it written that, oh, if the mayor wants it, we must do it. Or else I say we just pass a bill right now to go home for the rest of the year and let the mayor do whatever she wants. The arguments that I've heard for the last 5 weeks have been very hard to take, because we are talking about unfortunately, the reputation of the former solicitor and comments made about him last week I found reprehensible. Not because he's a friend, he's an acquaintance, because I've seen what he did for this city for 8 years. All these statements written today from the mayor, from my colleagues, some of my colleagues, all I can read is we've gotten a bum rap the last 8 years with our legal representation. Yet for 7 of those 8 years, not a single one of us said anything during budget sessions about it.
Mr. Chair, I did bring up.
You brought it up, Mr. Cruz, in the 8th year by proposing the recommendation.
In my first term.
Okay, so 1 out of 11. My apologies. The point is that if we weren't getting proper legal services, which we were, things would have been said earlier. So everybody's premise who's for this is that what we were doing was no good, wasn't working. What does that say about the individual who was in that job? What does that say about the predecessors before him? Because for the last 50 to 60 years, the city has done it this way. Over 7 mayoral administrations. Every single one of them doing the same thing. If things were not working as everyone talks about, why the heck would we keep it? The truth is, our last solicitor was stellar. He did things that no one saw. He was up at 11 o'clock every night, taking calls from you, from me, from others, putting his family to the back burner. For a salary of $106,000, which if you equate it in billable hours to what he did, is $71 an hour. Does anyone here tell me if there's a lawyer in the United States of America who makes $71 an hour? The answer is no. This matter of transparency, not quantifiable, it assumes that the former solicitor, and this is my opinion on what's been said, so I don't want anybody to say I didn't say that. But when you question the transparency of the former solicitor, you're questioning his integrity and who he is as a person and what he did for this city. So when he tells me he did 30 hours a week over a 4-month period when he took his time, because he was not required to take his time, because he was salaried. His predecessors weren't required. I'm supposed to think he's lying? I know he's not lying, because I saw him spend that amount of time. When we were in this room till 11 o'clock and he was sitting here for 5 hours. But don't take it from me, don't take it from him, since apparently people don't trust what he says, because we can't verify it. I'm going to quote from former city solicitor under the Lisa Wong administration, John Barrett, who, when asked by me how many hours he works a week, he said 35 to 40. Former assistant city solicitor Mark Goldstein in 2014 said he did 20 to 30. Mr. Pusateri didn't know about this. So his 30 hours, which is a low number if you ask me, is in line with his predecessors. So they all must be not being honest with what they're doing, because we can't prove it. The point is, they didn't have to prove it. They were salaried. That's what they signed up for. That's not their fault. Transparency? Counselors, you have seen the work these gentlemen do, and women, what they do. We've seen the time they've spent. You don't need a record book. So because we're here in a finance committee meeting, I'm going to bring up the cost to everybody, which I keep hearing from everybody. This is going to save us money. I had the same opinion 12 years ago. And you know something? I was deadly wrong. Wrong, because I didn't think of this through. I did the usual. What does Leominster do? What does this city do? Not understanding what their legal issues are, what they need, what they forego. No one knows. So to just take a budget document and say Leominster spends X, so therefore we can do it, is not a good comparison. I don't know what Leominster needs, what Leominster has. None of you do. I talked to Dean Mazzarella yesterday. Copeland and Page charges $235 an hour. Based on the budget in Leominster of $240, which is a budget, we don't know what they spend. They're not forthcoming with that. $235 over $240,000 budget equates to 20 hours a week of billable time, and that includes travel. Our attorneys have been spending north of 30. Not just Mr. Pusateri, but Mr. Barrett, Mr. Goldstein, Ms. Phillips. I can keep going down the list. It's not like Mr. Pusateri said 30 and then the other attorney said 10 tops. They all said the same number without knowing what each other said. So I'm going to use the 30 hours he gave me because I believe him. And it's convenient for others not to believe it because then it proves their argument. From a budget perspective, and this is as basic math as you can get, a second grader can follow this, as to whether this is going to cost us more or not. The current FY24 budget is $383,603. If you look at the second column that I provided you folks, that is the scenario if we pass this tonight where we go from the top solicitor's job to private, what goes away and what stays. And to be consistent with Councillor Van Hazinga, all of those little expense accounts will likely stay the same. Now, where am I saying that? Me, Talaman, and Costa, MTC, I'll call them from now on, in their fee agreement says they're retaining labor counsel. So that's not going away. And they also say that they have the right to retain attorneys on counsel, attorney on counsel, special counsel. So they're saying in their agreement, we will have to get special counsel at times probably. Fine. I'm not just arguing with them about that. I expect them to. So most, if not all, these expenses, consistent with what my colleague from Ward 4 did last week, are going to be the same. So what's going to go away? The $106,630 salary of the former city solicitor, his health insurance benefits for a family plan that I got from the auditor, 75% coverage of the city is $23,715. I'm assuming he took health care. I don't know. I'm not allowed to know. But I'm going to assume he did. Those two costs go away. The office expense account goes from $66,000 to $18,000. The auditor told me today that Ms. Pollock gets $1,500 a month for her office expenses. So that's $1,500 times 12, that's $18,000. So the city solicitor's salary goes away, health insurance goes away, and then $48,000 of the office expenses goes away, for a total of $170,000. What gets added? Well, here's the kicker. This is the most important piece. If you use what Councillor Van Hazinga said, he said, well, the $170,000 we save, folks, can go to MTC. And then he said, and I agree with his math, that equates to 16 billable hours a week. 16. Which my colleagues who are attorneys, President Zarella, Councillor Walsh, and Councillor Kuchar said, that's nothing. Again, consistent with what Mr. Pusateri said, he did 30 hours a week. Mr. Barrett, 35 to 40. Mr. Goldstein, as the assistant, as high as 30. This isn't conjecture, this is reality. 16 is nothing. Especially if they have to drive here. Because in the agreement, they're being paid for the travel, which is at least an hour. From their closest office, Millis, that's an hour. So every time they come here, 2 billable hours goes away right off the top. So 16 is the max. And it's likely going to be less compared to 30, compared to 35 to 40. It's more than a 50% reduction in service if the costs stay the same. If the costs go down, it's because they're not going to work as much. And you, my friend, said quote, in June 8th of 2023, President Zarella, quote, I've done work for clients who have used private legal firms, and yes, they pay less, but they also get less. Response times are longer, detail is much less, ordinances are messy and not well maintained because these municipalities will not spend the money required to have a full-scale review done by these firms. He went on to say, the city has the benefit of being able to discuss the business of the city with the solicitor at the drop of a hat, all night, all day. Accessibility is currently excellent. Let me quote for you folks what former Mayor Lisa Wong said, who I know is the town manager of South Hadley. Coincidentally, MTC is the chief counsel of South Hadley. But when Lisa Wong was mayor of the city of Fitchburg, which isn't South Hadley has a population of 18,000. Their budget is 1/3 at $54 million, not Fitchburg. What did she say when she was mayor of this city after 4 years? She said, quote, Fitchburg is not going to get, this is May 22nd of 2022, Fitchburg is not going to get better legal services under our current system for this price because I've looked. May 22nd, 2012, former Mayor Lisa Wong. In order to make the assumptions of the net impact of moving from public to private legal counsel, you do have to look at the entire equation. You have to look at the outputs. There are comparable sized cities that spend twice the amount Fitchburg does on legal services having various outside legal firms. And I can tell you they do not get that same level of service. They are on call. You have to come up with something you want them to do. And very rarely are they proactive. One of the great things about in-house legal services is you invest in them in order to save. Former Mayor Lisa Wong. And I have other quotes from her that I've passed out to the council that are gold quotes. Because they verify everything my colleagues said last June when they all voted, including the current mayor, against this very same thing. So, back to the cost. If me, Talaman, and Costa spend the equivalent amount of hours as our former solicitor, 30 hours a week, which is a low number, that is $337,500, $225 an hour times 30 hours a week for 50 weeks, 1,500 hours. If you want comparable services in this city compared to the last 5 solicitors, it's going to cost $337,500 just for them. We still have the assistant solicitor on staff. So we're not fully privatizing this department, we're partially. Why is that? Oh, I know why it is. Because Donna Pollock is phenomenal. But she's an in-house attorney. She's a Fitchburg attorney. Haven't I been told that the way we've been doing things isn't working out? So why does she work out? Contradiction. So it's good for the assistant, but not good for the top. Her costs stay the same. So if you look at the budget this year of $383,603, the budget next year, if they work the same amount of hours and give the same amount of service we have gotten for the last 20 years, the budget will be $542,758, an increase of 41.5%. Now, there's another way this can come out. There's only 2 outcomes, folks, to this. Either we're going to spend more for the same level of service, or we're going to spend the same and get far less service. Scenario 2, let's say that MTC works 16 hours a week, like Mr. Van Hazinga said, is more than adequate, which it isn't. And that includes travel. Some weeks it may be 16, other weeks it could be as much as 10 or 8. If they got to come here a lot, who knows? But let's say it's 16. If you want the budget for this year to be the same as next year, 383, no change in budget. then the billable hours a week would be 16 hours. The billable hours would drop by 45%. Basic math. Again, the premise on the other side is, solicitor doesn't know what he's talking about. 30 hours, how do we know that? I just gave you 4 reasons why it's believable. Tangible reasons why that's a believable number. So, one of 2 outcomes, folks. Either we spend far more to get the same level of service, or we spend the same and get far less service. There's no third option. We either increase our costs 41.5%, or we lose service of 45% minimum. Basic math. There's no 2 ways about it. Now, the mistake I made 12 years ago when I proposed this, I didn't do this kind of analysis. I just said, because I was stupid at the time, oh, Leominster spends $185, so we're all set. I didn't do any analysis. I didn't look at what Leominster was getting for that. And I just told everybody, from what Dean Mazzarella told me, they get 20 hours maximum, including travel. That is still far lower than what our assistant city solicitors spend on this city. So why do I go into this assuming that Leominster's doing it right and we aren't? No one can prove that. Everyone who makes that argument can't tell me how. They just say it because it sounds good. So I have proven unequivocally this will cost more, or we're going to get far less service. Basic math. Next.
Councillor, if I may.
Not yet, Mayor. I am still speaking, please. I will let you speak after. I will allow you to speak after. Councillor Joel Caddy, former Councillor Joel Caddy, May 29th, 2014, quote, if you take the 2 solicitors Fitchburg employs and multiply the amount of time they spend for the city at their private rates, that's what we would be paying for them, privately. It's obvious we are getting one heck of a deal on this system. Former Mayor Lisa Wong, 2012. At the current rate that these 2 solicitors, referencing John Barrett and Mark Goldstein, are working, if they were private, then they would only have to work 7 hours and 4.5 respectively. They can make more in the private sector. And frankly, I've asked them to do so much more than I asked the previous team of Ciota and Barrett, with less outside help. They could make significantly more if they were instead billing us privately. Part of me wants to just say thank you for working less than a third of what they would get privately, and that is the commitment of a true public servant. I have no illusions that MTC is competent, capable, qualified. They can't be in business if they aren't. I know they are. My colleague from Ward 4 last week referenced Lunenburg and Townsend. I don't need their recommendations. I know they're good. Lunenburg has a population of 11,000 people. Townsend, 9,000. Not even in the ballpark of what we are. Apples and oranges. I don't know what their legal issues are. I don't know. And so I'm speaking in this passionate voice, and I sound agitated for a whole bunch of reasons. Because the arguments for this are all subjective and without evidence. Whereas the arguments that I just provided you is concrete, and from people who did this for several years and knew all about this. That's why I'm upset right now. And my colleague, Mr. Cruz, Councilor Cruz, mentioned about the settlement budget, or what we spent in FY22. I know what he's talking about. It was a $900,000 settlement with the airport that we spent 2 executive sessions on. And who was in those executive session meetings with us? For the 3 hours each we were in those meetings. The former solicitor. Well into 10 o'clock at night. And in those meetings, Who was he speaking to? The outside special counsel that he hired to assist with this, because he was not an expert in airport. That's the other thing, folks. Just because an attorney uses outside help does not mean that they're incompetent or they're not qualified or experienced. This firm says in their contract, we retain the right to hire legal counsel outside. And oh, by the way, we're keeping labor. So why do we assume that because our former solicitors needed help, that they're not experienced, they don't know the law? Maybe it's because they had enough to do and they couldn't handle this on top of that, in addition to maybe not having the experience. Whether you have an in-house counsel or a private firm, they all need help. And what did we experience in those meetings? The former solicitor interacting, the attorney we hired was talking to him, would say all the time, I had about an hour conversation with you last week, Mr. Solicitor, in your office about this matter. He spent an hour of his day talking to this one attorney on the phone. The attorney was asking him questions he didn't know the answers to because he doesn't know Fitchburg, like our former attorney did. He'd ask our attorney questions that only our attorney could answer. This is the expert. The expert could not do his job without our solicitor's help. It isn't that the solicitor hires outside counsel and goes, you deal with it. They help. They're an integral part of what they're doing. This is not news to anybody who's served in this body. You've all experienced it. You may have issues with how the services may have been rendered here or there, but to question the 30 hours and this experience argument, I think is an insult to the person, even though it's not supposed to be about that. But who else could it be about? Because that's who we're comparing to when we look at something like this. What were we getting? So the costs will be astronomically higher for the same amount of time, or the services are going to be astronomically lower for the same price. I'd love to see how we're going to hear how that's not true. It's basic math. If they do 30 hours a week, comparable to the last 5 solicitors, that's what it costs. And that includes travel. So much of that time isn't going to be working on anything. It's going to be driving. Or, if we're going to save money or not have an increase, we're getting less service. Very simple. Can't stress it enough, this being a Finance Committee meeting. So I've gone on a long time because I've been waiting for 5 weeks to talk about this. Because our open meeting laws, which I think are ridiculous in this Commonwealth, you can't say anything publicly like a state legislature or a federal congressman can, drive me crazy. Because people are asking me all the time, why is this happening? And I tell them, I don't know. And that's the last point I want to make. In addition to this that we got tonight and this curveball, I like to call it, we received this order on January 11th. And this, what I'm about to say, goes to those counselors who are concerned that you're going to look obstructionist. Councilor Cruz said it. Councilor Zarella said it. My colleague, Councilor Cragen, last week said it. She said the word churlish, obstructionist. Councilor Cragen said just 7 months ago, quote, I have seen firsthand what our city solicitor does for Fitchburg and feel there is no need to change the services. Councilor Paul Boschman, quote, I call the solicitor all hours of the day each month, and if we have an outside firm, the cost would certainly not be less. Councilor Andrew Kuchar, an attorney himself, quote, an accessible, close-to-home solicitor sits through most meetings in full. We are not going to get that level of access and attention with an outside private firm that involves itself with multiple communities. And that's the other thing, too. It's been critical of the former solicitor and his predecessors, mind you, that they had their private practices. Folks, why do you think that is? They're on one-year appointments. They don't know if they're going to stay on a year after that, either by their own or whoever the mayor is. So they've got to keep their private sector job because they're not going to work for $71 an hour. But how is that different than having an outside firm who's got 29 other communities that they're chief counsel in and 7 or 8 more where they're co-counsel or special litigators for? They have a bunch of clients. Our former attorney had clients. Most of his time was spent with this city, if not all of it. And to say that it was part-time is an insult to him, to John Barrett, to Mark Goldstein, and to Deb Phillips, and beyond. It's not part-time. I don't get that argument. Then therefore, MTC should have no clients and focus on us. Because if you're going to attack the former solicitors for having their private practice, how is this any different? They're not the sole client of us. So, in closing, for those of my colleagues who now feel, and I knew this was going to happen, I knew it was going to happen. For my colleagues who are concerned that we're going to look like we're the bad guys in this if we don't pass this, in my opinion, that is a very weak argument and a reason to do something, especially if you have stated publicly multiple times you don't like this avenue. So we do a trial run, and if you don't think it's going to work, but you want to go forward anyway, aren't you then saying that you want to let it fail? Who does that benefit if you end up being correct? Doesn't benefit the taxpayers. This argument about we don't want to be an obstructionist. Folks, we are a legislative body. We are a check and balance to the administration. They can't spend any money without our approval. Whether it's budgetary, transfers, grants, free cash, we have a say. Like I said earlier, let's pack up and go home then if this is the argument we're going to make. Because I'm going to go tell my constituents this weekend, do not be fooled by this argument. This is exactly what is the plan, in my opinion. And why do I say that? January 11th is when we got this order. What accompanied this order? Nothing. No letter, no explanation of why we're doing this, why we're going against 50 years of practice. Nothing. A week goes by and we get a PDF link to their website, MTC's, that you can get by Googling them. So it wasn't anything insightful. Nothing specific to Fitchburg and how this impacts us. January 30th rolls along, our next council meeting. Did we get anything yet from the office, the administration, about why we're doing this? No. Did we get the signed fee agreement? No. Basic of basic things you need in order to have a transparent and collaborative form of government. Nothing. And I keep getting asked by my constituents, why are we doing this? I don't know. Someone said to me, why don't you ask? I said, why do I have to ask? The administration needs my approval. Why should I chase for the information? The mayor's been a councilor for 6 years. She knows how it works. If a mayor wants something done this important and critical, they lobby hard for it, and they don't wait until the day before the day of the committee meeting to make a statement. This has been out here for 5 weeks. That is not transparent. That is not collaborative. That, in my opinion, is treating this body like we don't exist or matter. So January 30th rolls along, still nothing. The mayor's chief of staff comes before us and says, we want you to do suspension of the rules. Doesn't say why. Because every time we have a suspension of the rules request that requires a 2/3 vote, what do we always get? We get an explanation as to why. Nothing. So we didn't do it. That's why we're here right now. February 1st comes the next day. I asked the mayor through an email for the fee agreement, the signed fee agreement, because it's been 3 weeks now and I have seen no agreement. Yet it's before my committee. The mayor provided it later that day, which tells me she had no intention of providing it unless asked. Why did it take 3 weeks? Why did it take me asking for it? She provided it that same day, so it was there, it was ready. Why did we have to chase for that stuff? No transparency. February 6th, Legislative Affairs. Mayor's not at the meeting. Her chief of staff doesn't say why we need to do this, just says we need to do it because time is of the essence. Now, I understand better than anybody that mayors have other obligations. I get that.
Mr. Chair, I strongly encourage we get back to the
Well,
matter
Mr.
at hand.
Cruz, I chair this committee, and I'm staying on point. I asked, because the word transparency keeps getting thrown around here like it's chiclets. And I'm going to tell the public what they don't hear, what we went through the last 5 weeks. You, sir, as well. In my opinion, you didn't get any respect. You didn't get any respect. You didn't get any respect. You didn't get any respect because it's been 5 weeks and we got nothing. So February 6th rolls along, not here, no explanation, other obligations. Got it. Where was this last week? Where was this 5 weeks ago? So there's been no transparency and no collaboration. And lastly, on the obstructionist argument, we are not being obstructionists, ladies and gentlemen. We are doing our jobs. I just gave you irrefutable proof that this is going to cost more or we're going to get less. And there is no evidence to suggest that the things said about the former solicitor and his predecessors is true. None. And so you're not obstructionist if you don't support this. You're doing your job. And if everyone was so concerned about this, in particular the mayor, if she was concerned about this happening, why then did she appoint, well, it's not a question, I'm just going to say it. She appointed this firm, or Ms. Mead, Attorney Mead. In our packets on January 25th, we got the appointment letter in lieu of this order being approved by us. So we're moving forward with a new way of providing legal services, not a new attorney. I cannot stress enough, this has nothing to do with the former attorney being let go. I expected it. I anticipated it. Her predecessor did it. His predecessor did it. It's what happens. No issue. Get rid of him. But this is changing the way the whole system works. That's different. So she appoints the person before the order's in place. So now I'm being told as a counselor, well, you've got to approve this. Because if you don't, we're not going to have legal services after a few weeks. Well, whose fault is that? That's not my fault. I didn't ask to appoint Ms. Mead before the money was appropriated. What should have happened was either the former attorney should have been kept on staff or replace him with somebody else in the current system, then do this during the budget sessions. So we don't have to feel like we're obstructionist. You are all highly intelligent and people with integrity. I have the utmost respect for each one of you because this job is not easy. You all spend a lot of time on this job and you should be commended for it. Do not be put in a position or feel like you're the bad guy and you're obstructionist because of our legislative duties on this matter. This is our job. And I spoke a lot tonight. It's on video. I'm going to speak online later. I'm going to explain to my constituency why I voted no. And it's not because I want to hamstring the mayor. It's because I don't agree with this move for the reasons I've stated, for the services we got and the cost it's going to entail. And all of the arguments in favor of going private, they're all subjective. They're all fluff. There's no evidence. It's just we're going to save money. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. It was stated earlier about pension benefits. Our attorney that we let go is not getting a pension. He didn't work 10 years, so it's a moot point. Some attorneys in the past have. But let me argue to you folks that if you're giving the attorney pension and health care benefits, why do you think that is? Why do you think our forefathers before us did that? Because the former solicitor was making $71 an hour, if not otherwise. What attorney are you going to find, unless they really love this job and love this city, is going to do that job for $71 an hour without benefits? That's why they're paid. And to hinge this pension and health care unfunded liability on one person is pie in the sky. But he's not getting a pension. And to quote Lisa Wong, where she talked about the amount of money these individuals save the city, it more than goes beyond what the pension costs are. her words, not mine. And to Councilor Cruz's argument about 2022 with that $900,000, that airport settlement, he did not say, with all due respect, what we would have paid if we didn't take the advice of our attorney and go to trial. You see, the public doesn't see the millions that individual saved us and his predecessors. Lisa Wong did. I got the quotes here. I won't burden you with them. He saved us a lot of money. B.F. Brown, Crocker School, the insurance issues. That's why that budget was high, because we had to pay a settlement out of court, or else we were rolling the dice big time. And that wasn't just his opinion, that was the special counsel's opinion as well. So, I ask you folks to please reconsider your position on this and go with your initial instincts, your initial positions, and what you said a mere 8 months ago. Maybe not Councilor Cruz, because he's consistent. He wanted to do this last year, and he made some good arguments for it. Arguments that I made 10 years ago, but I'm here to tell him, in my opinion, what I learned 12 years ago, I was wrong. I didn't do a more thorough analysis, because as Lisa Wong said, you got to look at everything. So do not be deterred from that obstructionist argument, and do what you think is right. And if we don't pass this, what happens? Well, we're using right now the unexpended office expense account of the former solicitor of $20,000 to pay MTC in the interim, which won't get us much. There should have been talks of a plan B when this was submitted, because otherwise it was just a foregone conclusion we were going to approve this, because nowhere does it say that the council has to approve this. So there was no homework done on a plan B. Not my problem. But there is a way to get around this if we don't pass this. Pay them the balance, and then get someone in-house. That's the solution. It's not going to stop legal services. That's a scare tactic. And as the mayor said in her letter, I underlined it, she says, with a budget approaching $200 million for a city of our size, it is becoming more difficult for a single solicitor to possess all the knowledge needed to properly represent a city of our size, scale, and complexity. So she is saying in the letter, there's a lot of work that has to get done. Do you all think we're going to get that kind of work done for 15 hours a week, including travel? If you really believe that, then the past solicitors going back 30 years must have been playing video games while working in the office. And I don't think anyone obviously believes that. So I am voting against this transfer for all the reasons I stated for probably the last 20 or 30 minutes. And I apologize, but I've been keeping this in for 5 weeks because I can't say anything because of open meeting law. But this has not been transparent. This has not been collaborative. This is too costly for the same amount of service, or we get less service. I will not feel like an obstructionist, because there's evidence already on the tape of why I'm voting against this. And not once did I say in my statement, because I want the mayor to fail, because I want the city to fail, because I don't want us to have legal representation. Never said any of those things. Thank you. President Zarella, you were first.
I believe, well, first I would...
well, you already spoke, so you...
No, I mean, I would yield to Councilor Walsh, but also
Walsh.
I believe the mayor was waiting to speak.
Yes, I will.
I will wait.
Okay, Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you. Giving aside the opinion of the transfer, I just wanted to clarify 2 points. One, at no point did myself or my administration ever disparage our former solicitor, Pusateri. We held him in the highest regard, and we appreciate his service to the city of Fitchburg. Additionally, to clarify another point, when it comes to the statements made during the budget, I would like to clarify my position, which was explicitly, I believe that the city of Fitchburg would benefit from contract services from outside legal counsel that specialize in municipal law. However, I believe that it is the mayor's authority to have the solicitor or assistant city solicitor in-house if that is their prerogative. Thank you.
Councilor Walsh?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would ask Mr. Chair, if you would indulge and let, since Attorney Mead is here, if she could perhaps explain her position on how many hours a week that they would be spending and how that comes out to a fee that's less than the annual salary.
I will allow her to speak on that, but I just want to caution you that I don't know how we can deduce from that any of value because we don't know yet. You know, we don't know what it's going to entail. All I know is what we've been getting. And if you are confining this to cost, if you want it to be cost neutral, cost negative, we're not getting that level. It's not even debatable. That's my opinion, Counsel. I mean, I'll let Ms. Mead speak because she didn't get a chance to speak last time, and she spent time coming here, and I apologize to her for that. But I can't stress enough that I have nothing but absolute respect for her and her reputation. I am not saying, nor have I said once in my argument against this, that I don't trust them or I don't think they're good.
And that is not...
yeah, no, right. I'm just saying from a numbers perspective and comparing to the last 6 solicitors, I don't see mathematically a third outcome of this, no matter what they accomplish. So, Ms. Mead, do you want to make any statements? I know I've said a lot, but
well,
I mean...
Thank you very much, Lisa Mead, Tellerman Casa, for the record. What I would say to you is this, and you can certainly, Mr. Chair, have your opinion, and that is your opinion, but our experience is that we have been able to provide all of the services that our communities need, and we do represent larger communities as well. We represent Burlington, we represent Winchester, we represent the city of Haverhill. So we do represent larger communities, and we are able to provide them all the services that they need, and typically it has been for less money that they have spent because of the efficiencies that we have, because of the in-house expertise that we have, and because we employ office hours. Now, I know that obviously that's different. You have in-house counsel. It's not the same, but there is an efficiency in that and a directness in that. And so you may be right. I don't think you're going to be right, but the experience, I believe, you're going to find that the services that we provide are all the services that the city needs, and they will be very well represented, and you're not going to see a downturn in any of those services, nor are you going to see a doubling of your budget. So
I didn't say double.
Well, I understand.
Yeah, I said 41%.
41%. You're not going to see that 41%, right? I understand that. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I've had a great experience in the city so far. Your department heads are fantastic. It's one of the first things I said when I went back to my staff after the first day I was here with office hours. Your department heads are stellar, and that is one of the reasons the city runs so well as also. But I think that in our experience is we will provide efficient and effective services, and I don't think you'll be disappointed.
Thank you. I will say that you mentioned efficiencies. I heard the mayor make that argument. I heard Councilor Van Hazinga, Councilor Cruz make that argument. So were our former attorneys inefficient to the tune of 60 to 70%? In your expert opinion?
Sir, I don't know the experience you had with your former attorneys. I respect Attorney Pusateri. I knew him. I knew Attorney Ciota, as a matter of fact. And we've had cases with both of those attorneys. So I don't think that they were efficient. I think they practiced a different way. I don't think it was different. It was inefficient. I don't know the answer to that. I'm just telling you what I can do.
And so to the mayor's comment about she never disparaged the former solicitor, what I meant by saying that was, you read the statements made by the Ward 4 councilor, by the mayor, about we want to have counsel that represents many facets of municipal law experience. Well, what does that imply or state about the former solicitors we've had?
It doesn't intend to do that, Councillor.
They were not as experienced. They were not as efficient. That's how I took that, and I'm not the only one. And they would disagree, obviously. That's what I meant by that statement. Councilor Van Hazinga even went further, that I won't get into. But when we say, because again, it's not about the person, but that's who we're comparing to, because that's all we got to go on. If you're saying better efficiency, more expertise, less labor counsel, you are in effect saying that the person that was doing that job for 8 years wasn't doing an adequate enough job.
I would like to clarify something, Mr. Chair. We're not providing Labor Council services.
Oh, right, I know, yes.
Right.
That's correct.
The city's staying with the same Labor Council they've had from Westwood for about 20 years, I think, maybe.
Ms. Mead, will you ever find an instance where you may have to have special counsel outside your firm? Have you had that experience before?
I have not in the last 15 years had that experience, but we always say that there may be that instance because you never know. And professionally, we'd want to have that ability to hire somebody else in the event we didn't have that, in the event we didn't have that expertise.
And could that expertise that you require that you don't normally require be because of the unique features of the city of Fitchburg?
I would say it would be the unique instance of that particular matter, but not necessarily the unique instance of the city of Fitchburg.
Okay. And so, yeah, I mean, there's one piece I forgot to mention, folks, that's critical in this, too. While it is correct that the mayor said last year that whoever the mayor is should have the option of choosing who he or she wants representing the city, in-house or public, what she did not say, and what I said, is legally the mayor doesn't get to make that call without our approval. The mayor can choose whoever she wants representing the city. We don't have a say in that. Within the confines of the current budgetary system, when you change the system, it does require council approval. Period. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not arguing the selection, I'm arguing the mechanism. We saw, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know, Councilor Walsh, if you were here. I don't know if Councilor Cruz was here either. I think you both were. I know you were here, Councilor Boschman, President Swell, you were here, I was here. Do you all recall a few years ago when the assessing department, the chief assessor abruptly retired, and what did the former mayor do? Hired an outside firm who specialized in assessing duties, highly experienced, highly reputable, glowing remarks from all of the communities they served. And we didn't privatize the whole assessing department, we only privatized the chief assessor. Just like here, we're only privatizing one solicitor, not two. I still maintain if you're going to do this, you do all or nothing, because the arguments against in-house counsel should apply to the assistant as well. But it doesn't for some reason. Just the chief solicitor. Well, she's experienced everything, got it, but why isn't she on retainer then? Why is she getting a salary, pension, and health care benefits? Contradiction. But assessor's department, we privatized. We did a trial run. I was one of the ones that said, let's do a trial run. Or was I wrong?
You're darn right you
What happened with the assessing department? Now, let me preface by saying I am not equating that occurrence with what would happen here. But it's a window into real-world experience that we have personally witnessed when you go from a long-standing, entrenched public service to an outside source. For Fitchburg, let me make that very clear. We privatized the chief assessor. What did the chief assessor say to us, the company that was before us that meeting? Of course, they're trying to win the job. They said, we service 57 other communities. We get glowing reviews. Call them. We'll do things better, quicker, more quality. What happened? We had a disaster. The services dropped significantly. The amount of care, time, responsiveness, and quality precipitously dropped. Don't take it from me, take it from my colleague to my left, who said on November 17th, oh, this actually isn't on my quote thing, it's in my notebook. November 17th, 2022, or 2021, I'm sorry. We were accustomed to getting a 78-page document from the assessor's office, and all we have here are 3 pages photocopied. The mayor, who was a counselor then, was exceptionally critical of the services we got from this private outside specialized firm who had years of experience and 57 clients with a reputation that was unquestioned. And they were both right. The service was terrible. It didn't even come close to what we were getting in-house. We got a 3-page, crappy photocopied document instead of 78-page booklet that we all think every citizen in the city should get. We couldn't get an answer from these guys. We didn't see them in the office. Again, not translating that exactly to what will happen here, but it's an exact same situation where we're going from public to private, outside, great, experienced, reputable, and look what happened there. And now we have an in-house person back again who's doing an exceptional job and who is back to providing the level of quality service we were expecting 50, 60 years prior to him coming on. So we've done this before, and it was a disaster. May have worked in other places, but it didn't work here. So I want you to remember that. Keep that in the back of your mind. This, to me, is not something we should play around with on a trial basis, because by saying it's a trial basis, you're also saying you don't have much confidence if it's going to work or not, but let's see what happens. Knowing there are risks involved, and then what happens if those risks pan out? We're in trouble. But you do know what has worked. The last 7 mayors know what has worked. And before anyone says to me that Lisa Wong is the town manager of South Hadley and MTC is chief counsel South Hadley, MTC was hired in 2019 before she became town manager. This was the Board of Selectmen's decision, not hers. She may have great things to say about them today, I don't know. I don't care what she has to say about them today. I care what she said 10 years ago when she was running this city. And you won't hear me say that often, considering how much I disagree with her on a routine basis. President Zarello.
Thank you. First, I'd just like to make a small clarification just because apparently on June 8th, I misspoke slightly, and it's not actually even relevant tonight, but I don't want to be on the record with a false statement. I have not done work for clients who have used private legal firms. That would be duplicative and somewhat silly. I have done work for private clients in which I have worked with cities that use private legal firms. That said, I don't recant any of the things I've said in the past. I said from the get-go, I am still skeptical. I still have concerns. I don't at all think that our prior arrangement was unsuccessful. I think Vinny was great. I really enjoyed working with him, and quite frankly, I probably worked with him more closely than any other member of the council. I don't contest the math, and I'm not convinced that this will save money. But my reason for trying to work this out is not because I'm afraid of being the bad guy. I've done that before. I don't have a problem being the bad guy. I'm not afraid of being labeled obstructionist. That's not what I think it is. I don't think that anyone who votes against this is being an obstructionist, and I wouldn't feel that I was if I voted against it either. But this year got off to a bit of a rocky start between the mayor and the council. There were breakdowns in communication. I am, and this isn't anything I haven't said to the mayor directly, I'm not thrilled with the way this came before the council. It was not the way it should have happened. I've said that all along. But at some point, if we want the city to be successful for the next 2 years, we have to take the first step to changing that relationship, to building a collaborative relationship. And that is why Vice President Van Hazinga and I went in at the last minute. It wasn't to keep anyone else out of the loop. It was just to try to find common ground. And the two of us went in because we are the president and the vice president, respectively. And what we found is that the mayor was willing to work with us on it, willing to consider our concerns and consider our proposed solution. And so I don't know that this is going to work. I do think it's a bit of a gamble. But we've got to start working together at some point. I don't want to see 2 years of constant power struggles. I don't think anyone does. And I want to emphasize, because I know otherwise someone will misinterpret it, I'm not saying that that's what the chair wants either. That is not my implication. But, yeah, I mean, I am honored that my colleagues for now 4 years running have made me council president. But that role comes with responsibilities. And one of those responsibilities is to do the legwork behind the scenes, to reach out and build relationships between the council and other parts of the government. Not just the mayor either. I spend a lot of time talking with department heads. I spend a lot of time talking with the chairs of boards and commissions. It's part of the job. And, like I said, maybe this doesn't work. Maybe I don't get proven wrong. And we need to look at this in a month or two or 6 or whatever and say, all right, that didn't work. But unlike with the assessor, I do find that an interesting comparison. But the thing is, none of us on the council were specially competent to make any assessment of the quality of the firm we were working with then. None of us had any experience in that field. And in this case, all of my skepticism is about the system. But I do know that at the very least, the worst case scenario in this case is we run out of money before the end of the fiscal year. And that's when we say, all right, well, we've got to take another look at this. But we're not going to have a disaster. We're not going to have a failure of services, because that's not how competent professional attorneys operate. Even if we run out of money, because I believe that the attorneys of this firm are ethical attorneys, they're not just going to wash their hands of us immediately and say, oh, tough, you're on your own now. Your last penny ran out yesterday. And so it's a calculated risk on my part. It's a calculated risk not solely for the purpose of the cost of the legal department, because I didn't have a problem with the prior arrangement. But it's an investment in a well-functioning city government going forward. The mayor and I have disagreed about many things over the last 6 years. At some point, I feel like if this is going to work, I've got to take a small leap of faith. And I hope it will be rewarded. I hope it will be reciprocated when the time comes. And that's the reason for this. It's not because I've changed my mind entirely on everything I said before. All those quotes from me, I stand by every one of them. It's not because I'm suddenly convinced by, pie-in-the-sky promises. Not that any have been made, but I'm just saying, it's not that anyone just came to me and said, oh, well, trust me, this is all going to go great. That's not how I operate. But we have a fixed amount of money here. It's not a huge amount of money that we're being asked to transfer. And so within that parameter, I'm willing to make that gamble. And if it falls apart, I'll take my fair share of the blame. But we've got to start somewhere. I yield the floor.
Councilor Boschman?
Well, first of all, I want to say, Anthony, thank you very much, and I want to thank Andy and Hasenet for this, working hard. I thought you guys did a good job. Now, number one, I want to get one thing squared away here. And I'll be the first one to tell you, yes, I did call Vinny up. But the reason why I called Vinny up is when we talked about the airport, I wanted to make sure that I understood it. Just like I went to see the young lady because I got a problem coming up into my ward, and I wanted to find out what we can do. And I don't put myself down. I think I'm up here. But I like to make sure I understand. So that's why I asked a lot of questions, because I told you the same thing. I vote on issues. I'm not afraid to take a stand, but I want to make sure I understand the issues. And that's why I called Vinny. Pierre Brown, the airport, and some other different things. I'll give you an example. I don't really think, I want to make it very clear to everybody, that anybody's saying they deny Vinny of working 30 hours, or Dakota, or Debbie Phillips, or anybody else. Because I can tell you, I sit here one day, and I tell you that sometimes I put in 40 to 50 hours being a city councilor. Because I know, because I'm not smart like a lot of you guys here, and I'm not putting myself down. I want to make sure that I understand what I'm voting on. And that's the truthful thing. I want to make sure I understand it. So when I take a stand and I get a big mouth, I want to make sure I can back up what I'm saying. So that's, because I remember one meeting, and I'm not picking on the council to my right, when he got up and he said, anybody that puts over 8 hours of Buffalo in the thing. And I looked at it, I said, God, I put in about 30 or 40. And I remember Amy Green saying, I put over 30 hours too in 40. I don't know how he does it for 8 hours. Not putting you down, Marcus. But that was said. And I said, God, and I said, I put a lot of time in. Because I remember, I don't mind trying new things. I think it's great to try new things. I like to try new things to see if at least better. It could be better, it could be worse. Just like you said, just like the assessor. But in all honesty, you even said it was terrible at the end. It was terrible. They were terrible. I'm not afraid to say yes. I told you that I was going to support you. I'm going to support you. And if it goes too high, I agree with Anthony. We'll just cut the rugs out and say thank you very much for your service. We can't afford you. We live in a small town, and you heard me say it tonight, we don't make a lot of money here. Believe what you want to believe, look around. If we did, we wouldn't be where we are today, empty buildings and dilapidated buildings and roads terrible that you hate to even take a brand new car on. So, but on this here, I think we're putting this, we're making Vinny the scapegoat, and that's not true, because I think we all have respect for Vinny, each and every one of us. I did call him. And a couple of times I butt called him a couple of times by mistake. But I called him. And we joked around a lot and that. And to say that Council Cruz or Council Andy Van Hazen there or anybody's questioning his ability, no. It'd be no different than you question me saying, Boschman, you don't put in 30 hours a week. There's no way you put in 30 hours a week.
Council, I never said to you don't put 30 hours a week. I know you do.
Well, I know, but I'm just using that for an example.
All right.
Because some people say, it was said before, people who put in anything more than 10 are buffaloing people and that. So
I never said that.
one meeting you did, Councilor.
No, I did
Am
not.
right? But we're
No, I
not
did
going to
not.
talk about that
Go
now.
pull the tape and show me where I said that.
Oh, I can't pick up the
I
paper.
would not say something like that.
You can ask even Green. But anyway, I do want to say thank you, Anthony. I think you did a very good job. I mean, on this, I didn't read it all yet. I got to go back and read it again. And I think Andy did a very good job. And in all fairness to the mayor, I'm going to be honest with you, and you're going to say, geez, if that was my father, I wouldn't be saying that. They did call me up for the book. I didn't get the paperwork you said about the deal. I never got that. I never even thought about it. As a matter of fact, I got it from Andrew Kutcher. He sent it to us, and Andy Van Hazen did. I never got a copy.
Councilor, if I may, I emailed the entire city council when it was requested.
I have to? I didn't see it. So I
3
never,
weeks after that, when we had to make a request.
yeah. But other than that, that was the only thing, because they did call me up. They called me up to come down to get the book. When I read the whole book. I was impressed with it. You read the whole book, didn't you? Or her book? The pamphlet they sent us?
Yes, before we got the link, because I went on the website.
Yeah. I get the book.
I didn't need the book.
But anyway, I just wanted to tell you that. I wanted to clear that up because she asked me, I'm going to tell you honestly, when I was up there yesterday afternoon when you were talking, she said, you want my phone number? I said, no, don't give me the phone number because I don't want anybody to say I'm the one that raised the cost of everything. Just because I didn't understand something, I said, if I come down on a Wednesday and they're there on a Wednesday, I'll ask my questions then. But other than that, if they're going to be here already to solve problems, I can ask then.
Yep.
But she did want to give me her phone number. What?
Are you all set?
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah,
I yield the floor.
I just want to say that what I presented tonight, these are not my numbers. These are not a fictional creation. Forget anything about the former solicitor. Forget all this violin playing about the solicitor, okay? This is about the numbers, since this is a Finance Committee meeting. No one has been able to refute them. No one will refute them. It's not going to happen. It's very clear, cut, and dry. The only thing you can take away from this analysis, because this is what I do for a living, if you believe the billable hours that our former attorney said he did, which is commensurate with the other 5 solicitors, so it is, you are either going to pay $160,000 more for the same amount of hours, or you're going to get 45% minimum less hours served. There's no third option. So if you support this, you support either a 41.5% increase in cost or a 45% minimum reduction in service. And if you support the minimum reduction of service, it goes back to my argument of the former solicitor, because he's the comparative point. Therefore, that means that you believe, in my opinion, that the 30-plus hours he worked a week, the 35-plus hours John Barrett worked, Goldstein, Phillips, Ciota, those weren't really necessary, because we can get by with 16 at worst, at best, and likely less when they have to travel. That's the message. Whether that's your intention or not, that's the message. That if you are okay with the services dropping by 45% to keep the budget the same or less, then 50% plus of the former solicitor's time and his predecessors was on nothing. Sorry, I know I'm going to hear rebuttals to this, but it's irrefutable. You either agree to more cost, you agree to less service, and if you are okay with the less service, then that means our former solicitors were working more time than they should have, and I don't believe that's the case. Through the testimony of several solicitors before him. So that's why I'm voting against this. I am not in favor of higher costs. I am not in favor of less service. And I don't believe our attorneys were inefficient to the tune of 50 to 67%. President Zarella. Councilor Walsh. Sorry, my apologies.
That's quite all right, Mr. Chair. First of all, I'm not comfortable with the way that this was done. I'm going to repeat what I said in legislative affairs. I think there was a lack of transparency in the way that this was handled. It is the mayor's appointment. and I recognize that, but the council does determine the payment. I have no qualms whatsoever about the competency of the firm or Attorney Mead herself. And taking with that, this is not a referendum on the prior city solicitor whatsoever. It should be focused on the competencies of this firm, and I'm not going to compare, whatever. I am uncomfortable with the fact that the city solicitor is being paid in one fashion and the assistant city solicitor is being paid in a different fashion. It doesn't. I will agree with Councilor Di Natale that it doesn't make sense to me to pay one per hour and the other one on an annual basis. I would still feel more comfortable if there was a fixed amount. I believe that it's a budget amount that we can live with. The council voted on that budget amount, and I think that is a better way to go. However, President Zarella has drafted a number of amendments. I would be open to considering those amendments if they were to be raised at a future city council meeting when this issue is voted on. But I believe that right now, and I'm going to say again what I said at the Legislative Affairs meeting, I believe that the contract is invalid, and I can't support payment under an invalid contract. So I will not be voting in favor of this payment.
President Zarella.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate, I do not dispute the chair's math. I never dispute the chair's math because that's a losing game. But I will point out that if I were mathematically certain that this would cost the city more money, as opposed to simply strongly believing that it will, then I wouldn't be supporting it regardless. Interbranch comedy does not justify, knowingly costing the city money. However, I will point out that there is a possible scenario in which we could make do with fewer hours without the former solicitor or any former solicitor having been inefficient in their use of time. And where that comes from is simply familiarity with a particular area of law. I know for a fact, because I was involved in a lot of it, that a lot of what Solicitor Pusateri spent time on was research, as it should be. It's possible, I don't know that this will be the case, but I'm just making clear that it is a possibility, that the familiarity that Meade, Tellerman, and Costa have with particular areas of law might mean that they require less research time. Certainly when I'm dealing with, say, a zoning matter for a client, I have to spend less time on research than I would if I were dealing with an area of law that I was relatively less familiar with. And there are a lot of novel issues that come up in the city, novel issues that I or Solicitor Pusateri had never had any reason to know because it never came up before. I suspect that there are at least some of those that the attorneys at the firm will have encountered simply because they've practiced in more municipalities and seen more situations. That's not a judgment of competency, quality, anything. I'm just saying it is theoretically possible that the scenario where we get by with fewer hours might not mean anything derogatory about our prior solicitors.
Mr. President, can I ask you a question? Sure. Did you not say last week at LA Affairs that 16 hours is nowhere near enough?
I did, and I do still think that that's going to be tight.
So
I'm just saying there's a theoretical possibility.
Okay, but I'm going on your experience as a seasoned litigator, as is the person to your right and the person sitting in the chair, who all said the same thing that our former solicitor said for the last 25 years, that 15, 16, 14 hours a week is nothing.
I don't disagree. I said I stand by every statement I've made. I'm just saying you presented a dichotomy, and I was saying there is a third possibility. I don't know that that will pan out.
Well, I give you more credit, sir, than you do yourself. I give you a lot of credit with those statements because you're in the field. And that's. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I am apparently good at presenting the illusion of infallibility, but I am not infallible, and there are attorneys with more experience than me, many attorneys with more experience than me, and I understand how the legal practice works. I will say that for a solicitor working on their own, yeah, definitely, 16 hours is nowhere near adequate. And I do have and like I said, I still do have my concerns about whether it can be adequate under this model either. But I have never worked in a mid-sized firm, and so I do not want to claim that I know for certain that there is no way they can do the work in that amount of time. That's all. I'm just trying to be fair to everyone. But I do stand by my prior statements and concerns. Like I said, I'm making a leap of faith here. If it doesn't pan out, it doesn't pan out. But I've got to just start somewhere.
That's precisely why I provided the quotation sheet. Not to hold you to something, because I myself have switched before too. I did it because this was 7 months ago, when we had the opportunity to do this very same thing 7 months ago, and the council by a 9-2 vote said no. Other than one voting member who did say it should be the mayor's prerogative who chooses how to do legal services, that's not a position on whether in-house is better or not. Everybody else made definitive statements 7 months ago defending the system and opposing a change in that system. And even with the change of the mayor, those concerns you all said 7 months ago, excluding Councilor Cruz, Councilor Walsh, and Councilor Van Hazenga, and the mayor, nothing has changed from what you said 7 months ago. That's why I put it before you. I guess I'm a creature of consistency. Nothing has changed. The comments you made 7 months ago, Councilor Schultz, Fleming, me, Zarella, Cragen, Kuchar, they're the same today. You didn't say the mayor should get to pick whoever he wants. I watched the tape. None of us did, other than the mayor currently. You all said, in-house ain't going to work, here's why, and now you're saying, let's give it a shot. It's inconsistent. Because 7 months ago, those arguments weren't any different. We could have said no, we could have said yes to Councilor Cruz's petition, and forced the mayor to have a private firm. We didn't do that. And there were 7 budget sessions before that one where no one said a peep about the budget being in the sense of putting an order forward. So I'm just a creature of consistency and looking at scenario A versus scenario B. That's my analytical mind with my financial experience. Understanding that you don't have a crystal ball, but I guess what I'm trying to say is I feel like you all are selling yourselves short on your initial convictions, and I'm holding you to it because you made perfect sense. Not 10, 20 years ago, 7 months ago. What you said, Mr. Beauchemin, earlier is not what you said 7 months ago. You said the complete opposite. So I'm just baffled by it. And I mean, you guys can argue with me, but go watch the tape. I'm making it up. This is what you said. So, like I said, it is what it is. I mean, I don't buy the argument of obstructionism, and I believe that many of you did not feel like that initially. This idea of, thanking you and Councilor Van Hazenga for working with the mayor, I already said it twice, I'll say it a third time, because I know how this is going to go on social media. that I am doing this to be obstructionist. That's not what I'm doing. Never said it once. Please watch the tapes, everybody. Don't listen to what you're fed, the Cliff Notes. Right? And because no one has said your math is wrong, because it isn't, and because everyone is saying, well, yes, but it could be this, it could be that. As a Finance Committee chair, no one tonight can refute this math. And so I'm sitting here going, do I want it to cost more or do I want to get less? And I guess the hang-up is, well, what does less mean? Maybe it does mean they can do things 50 to 60% more efficiently than the former 5 solicitors. Maybe not. I'm going to err on the side of not that they're not efficient or competent. I don't think that's enough time for them. And I have a great deal of respect for our solicitors, as you all do, as Ms. Mead said she does, where I'd like to believe that if you've got 3 or 4 solicitors in a row saying the same thing, something is true there. And I feel that this hamstrings the firm. So I will not speak anymore. I said enough. I'm not voting for this. And I have no problem taking it to my constituents to explain everything in detail tonight and what's going on and the math, because when you get right down to it, no one has ever said on this council, you especially, Mr. President, sometimes it drives me crazy how open you are to bridging a divide, because many times it's warranted, but there are some times where it's a little overkill, in my opinion. This is a matter of putting the cart before the horse. Did any of us say, appoint this new firm and change the way services are presented before you get the transfer passed? No one did. I can sleep well tonight knowing I had nothing to do with this. I'm against it now. I'm against it last year. I'm against it next year. But to say that if we don't do this, we're not going to have legal representation, or it might put us in jeopardy, there are Plan Bs that I think should have been entertained in the event this doesn't pass, and because it wasn't entertained, why is that my problem? I'm not trying to put the city in a bad position. I'm just saying, I don't agree with this. It's wrong to me. And it's not my responsibility to figure out what the next course of action is. It's to look at what's in front of me right now. So that's it. It's frustrating for me, as you can tell, because I bring these quotes to light and I make these arguments partly because they're irrefutable, partly because you would think that after 7 months, unless things have changed, you'd stay with it. But that doesn't. That may not be the case, obviously. So I know I'm probably ticking some people off that I'm talking too much. Go ahead.
I didn't say anything, Mr. Chair.
No, I know. But, Council, I know you're probably clocking the amount of minutes I'm speaking, and I don't blame you. But go ahead. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To begin with, I don't think you're being obstructionist. I don't think anyone should think you're being obstructionist. I've served on the council with you for, now this is the 7th year, and the whole time under both mayors that we've served together under, I've always seen you vote whatever you think is best for the city, regardless of anyone else's opinion. That's admirable. It's not the way we approach things is a little different, but we're both, focused on what's best for the city. I don't doubt that. I don't think anyone else should either. That being said, you said nothing has changed in 7 months. One thing has changed. The mayor has changed. That doesn't change the calculus of the actual policy, but what it does change for me, and I admit, my frustration with how this was brought forward caused me to not necessarily be on this track initially. But what that does change for me is that we're going to have 2 years of this council and this mayor. No matter what we do, no matter how we vote, we're going to have 2 years. We've got to make it work. And so there are some things that I'm willing to pinch my nose on, because not because I'm worried that I'm obstructing or because I don't want to be the opposition or anything like that, but just because there's going to come a time, sometime, probably sooner rather than later, when I'm going to have to go to the mayor and say, look, I know you're not convinced of this thing that we feel needs to be done. Can you trust us on this? Can you give us a shot? And I hope that in that instance it will be reciprocated. Because whether we agree or not, the city only runs if we find a way to work together. And again, I'm not saying anyone else doesn't want to, but I am saying that in my particular position, it is in a more specific way my duty to try to facilitate that. So that's what I'm doing, and I have no doubt that you're comfortable going to your constituents on this. I am too, and I know I'll catch flack. I know I will. That's fine. That's fine. I accept that. And if it does go poorly, I'll accept the flack for that as well. But I have to think about how we move forward, how we get through not just this disagreement, but the next one and the next one and the next one. And that requires, like I said, a bit of faith. So, you know, and I'll say right out, if I get burned on this in some way, no one's going to play me for a fool. But I'm willing to extend that bit of faith and see where it leads. So I would make a motion. I'm sorry. I will wait on Councillor Cruz.
Councillor Cruz?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I appreciate everyone's patience with this. I got a lot of notes here, so if I bounce around, like I said, I appreciate your patience. The first, I want to credit the diligence of the chair for putting this information together. I think it's some really solid work, and I don't know how far back or how much watching you had to do to get all these quotes, but I assume it was quite a few hours. So I sincerely appreciate the effort.
Thank you to FATV, too.
And FATV, yes, always thank you, FATV. But it's worth noting, and I know you've kind of defended this, Mr. Chair, you've talked about this already. You know, there's a lot of quotes from the former Mayor Wong here about why it was important at that time for us to have an in-house solicitor. And despite, however, she came into the town administrator role at South Hadley and where the representation was already there, you're still there, correct?
Yes.
And in your knowledge, has there been any discussion about making a transition back to in-house solicitor? So it's fair to say or to speculate that Mayor Wong is happy with how things are going. I also want to say that, you know, there's been some comment about subjectivity to this, and in no way do I intend to disparage previous administration or previous solicitor. There are just numbers here that are difficult for me to ignore. And I brought those numbers up, so I won't go back into them. And I do want to ask Attorney Mead some more questions. So the damages, litigation, and labor.
Did you remove your, sorry, Counsel, did you remove your?
I did, yes.
You did remove him. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Continue. I'm sorry. I thought he didn't remove the motion.
Damages, litigation, labor negotiations totals about $80,000. Is that the budget amount you've given us?
So The current budget?
Yeah.
Right.
And that'll be consistent with your other cities and towns? Or?
Right. So the damages, obviously, that's personal property damages, so it depends on what happens in town, obviously. But litigation, we're going to handle all the litigation, obviously. Right.
And for these numbers, how consistent would you say that these are hit on?
Oh, with our similar communities, correct.
And they're generally, you hit those numbers on an annual basis, would you say?
Yeah, I will tell you in the 20 years that I've been doing this, we've not ever gone over budget in a community, and they have not ever said we haven't delivered the services.
That's good to know. Thank you very much. I do also, I agree with the gentlelady from Battelle Street as well, though, that there are some concerns with the legality of the way the arrangement was reached and the contract and whether or not this is legitimate. In your expert opinion, is the legality of this contract significant?
It is, and I'd like to address that for a minute, and I certainly appreciate the counselor's comment on that. It's interesting to note, of course, that in the ordinance, it says that the solicitor will sign, and it's got a particular way to sign it, any contracts, agreements, documents, or bonds that are submitted to him or her for their approval, right? So it doesn't say that every contract has to be signed by the solicitor. And certainly under statute, under state law, it's contracts for construction projects that are required to be signed by the city solicitor. So it is also not unusual for the city solicitor to sign. They don't sign. I'm not going to sign my own contract, obviously, nor does the former council. Typically, it's signed by the accountant or the auditor and the mayor. Right.
Councilor Cruz, could I defer to President Zarella for a second? Because he was going to speak on what you asked.
Yeah, of course.
Attorney Mead, could you, I know most of the city solicitor provisions are contained in Chapter 3.
Yep.
But do you happen to have with you Chapter 21, Section 11?
I don't. Well, I do, actually, coincidentally.
Because that one does read a little differently and does actually mandate that the city solicitor sign every contract.
Yeah, it says that they will prepare by or that the contracts entered into by the city or any department, board officer thereof shall either be prepared by or submitted to the city solicitor. So if a contract isn't submitted to the city solicitor, they're not going to review it and sign it. And I think it's because, obviously, if you have, well, first of all, if you have an in-house counsel, you're not going to have a contract with them.
Right.
But if you have outside counsel, of course, the solicitor will sign that because they're going to be appointing them as assistant city solicitors.
Of course.
But if their city solicitor is with a fee agreement, you're not going to have the city solicitor sign that. So it wouldn't be submitted to the city solicitor for approval.
Right, but under my reading of that provision, the city can't enter into a contract.
Right, it goes on. It certainly goes on to say no contract should be executed unless and until so approved under Section 2111. Correct.
Right. So now I will say, in the drafting that I've done,
correct,
it does fix that problem.
Right. It cleans that up for that one particular. It would clean it up for that one particular contract.
But under the ordinance as currently written, we do have a contract that was putatively entered into by the city without the city solicitor having signed off on it.
You do, because of impracticality, right?
Right. So I guess I'm not necessarily comfortable saying that the ordinance has an exception for impracticality when there's no. So I do agree with my colleague on that aspect. But like I said, I'm willing to fix that.
Right.
But
and I do see your language, and I agree with your language would clear that up for the change of the form.
Okay.
But as you know, under state law, if the accountant or auditor signs a contract and the chief executive officer signs a contract, it's an effective contract.
Right. We just happen to have
an additional
an additional requirement in the city. I'll yield. I was just making that one point.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I only have a few more points, and then I would, as President Zarella was going to do, encourage a vote. I have no doubt, and Mr. Chair, your math abilities or financial abilities is the reason that you're the chair of this committee. It's because you do this for a living. But I have trouble taking this formula, if you will, as irrefutable fact. This is a mathematical hypothesis, its figures are yet to be proven, and it's a formula created. So it may very well be completely correct, but it may not be, depending on the changes that we're going to make. The additional lawyers, the additional expertise, the additional experience. And this leads me to my final point, or two more points, excuse me, and that's, in no way do I believe the previous solicitor incompetent of their duties or didn't do the work that was required. I just believe that 16 lawyers are probably going to be better than one, and that's my biggest argument for this case. And as far as the obstructionism, we have a duty here to be a legislative body and to check and balance the executive branch. And I don't think obstructionism is anyone's motivation for this at all, or for any of their decisions, or ever would be. But like I said earlier, I encourage this body to follow President Zarrella's advice and do what we can to make sure the residents of the city of Fitchburg are taken care of and have appropriate legal representation. And I have full faith and confidence that Attorney Mead and her firm will be able to accomplish this. Thank you. I yield the floor.
Ms. Mead, Attorney Mead, how often do you bill? What's your billing frequency?
Every 30 days.
Every 30 days, so every month, once a month?
Correct.
Have you submitted a bill yet?
Not yet, but I have the invoices all sitting on my desk when I go back to the office tomorrow morning.
What was officially the first day you started working for the city with billable hours, or a surrogate or a fellow attorney from your firm?
Well, it would have been me. I think it was our first day of office hours. I don't know off the top of my head. Sorry about that. I mean, I can tell you tomorrow when I go look at the invoices.
Okay, so the invoices that you are preparing for, like, what's the cutoff date every 30 days?
So we do the 15th. So we cut off on the 15th, and then we mail them out on the 20th.
And so we should expect to see your first invoice
next week.
Next week.
That's correct.
This is a question for the mayor. Are we as a committee and as a council able to see those invoices every time it's received? Are we going to be able to have that information?
I don't see why that would be, unless there's some sort of confidential.
Correct. It's a public document unless there's ongoing litigation or personnel matters or things like that. We would have to redact them, but otherwise
it's a public document.
I know we get the status C reports every month that show. This one's going to be messy because of the transfer and the mixture of the former solicitor's costs with yours.
Right.
So obviously, if this were to stick and go forward for a full fiscal year, we'd have a better clarity just by the report of what you're charging. But in the meantime, it'd be nice to get the invoices. Yes.
Mr. Chair, could Auditor Cronin speak to some of the previous
So this will be a new and separate line item, so it will be clearly transparent. It will be city solicitor services.
Okay.
And I would just like to clarify for the council the current status of our labor negotiation previous line item to this point. That has been largely expended. So that will be coming forward, just, to let you know that was, coming into this office, that was already, up to a point where it was going to need additional appropriation.
Thank you. One question I had about the budget. So damages persons and properties, you would still need that, correct? Because that's not your time, that's damages that are awarded that you'd have to.
Oh, correct. I'm not including that in right.
No, I'm just making sure, because my colleague from Ward 6 mentioned about this being hypothetical and stuff, and I'm merely doing what Ward 4 Councilor Van Hazinga did in terms of removing the solicitor, the health benefits, and his office expenses, and assuming everything else is the same, barring some changes here and there because you're still keeping the labor negotiator. You still need damages in persons and property, appraisals, code enforcement for Donna Pollock. The litigation special counsel line item of $25,000, is that where you would probably not need it as much, but would there be, in your opinion, money set aside in that account in case you needed special counsel extra, or is that going to be in your billable hours? in your contract services line item instead.
Yeah, I think that we haven't worked. In fact, I have a meeting next week with the auditor about setting up the budget for next year. So we haven't really thought about that. But I would say it would come out of our line item if we had to hire an assistant, appoint a special counsel, right?
So I think it's prudent to keep that in there in this analysis because they may end up having to use it. Maybe not, but they may.
Right.
But that's the only line item I can see, other than the ones I took out, that would come out, which would still result in the conclusions that I arrived at with both numbers. And to the formula comment that Councilor Cruz made, all I was trying to show the committee and the public is you know what the hourly rate is, and you know the amount of hours that we were accustomed to getting, and you know all of the constants, whether we stay with MTC or we go back to the way we were doing things. All I was saying, because I was using the logic that Councilor Van Hazinga did, where he said if we get rid of the in-house solicitor, that money then goes to MTC, and this is what we can get for that money. He was using a cost-neutral proposition. So, yes, I was forcing the budget to be the same, but what that forcement does is it says, well, this is the equivalent number of serviceable hours if we kept the budget the same. We're not barring efficiencies or inefficiencies. I was just trying to make that point that if we hold true to that argument that the costs aren't going to change, this is the number of hours that will be as a result within that confines of that new budget. If we want the hours to be the same, or if your firm has to work that amount of hours, this is what that number will be for a cost. It's not a criticism of the firm. It's simply saying, this is what we were getting, and this is what we were getting consistently for 25 years. This is what we are affording them if we don't increase the budget at all. We just say to them, this is what you're getting, this is the amount of hours you have. That's the resulting amount of hours compared to the 30 plus, or if they were to do the 30 plus, here's the resulting cost. So, yes, there are two scenarios in line with Councilor Van Hazinga's analysis, which I think is sound analysis, in that if you're going to get rid of these costs, well, they're obviously going to shift to MTC, and then the mayor's going to have to make the determination in her next budget. Is she going to keep the budget the same? Is she going to drop it? Is she going to increase it? We don't know yet. We won't know till May 15th. But I was just pointing out two scenarios. If we keep it the same, this is what happens to the amount of service. If we drop it, the number of service hours drops even further. If we do the same amount of service that we have been doing, the cost goes here. That's all I was trying to show the committee. And so that's it. So
I make a motion that we...
sorry.
I apologize.
Were you finished?
Just one final question.
Yep.
Please. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just forgot to ask one thing because we have a lot of concerns, and I do too, about the driving billable hours for travel. Do you allow your staff to zoom in, or would you zoom in at any point? Or?
Yes. I think that the one thing we all learned from COVID is we can all be a lot more efficient by doing meetings via Zoom and things like that. So however it works for people, the most efficient, effective way to do it. Obviously, sometimes being in person is really important. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't do so well in a Zoom tonight, for example, right? So, but yes, the answer is yes. Telephone calls, Zoom, whatever.
Thank you. I yield the floor.
I'll make a motion that we recommend the council hold this item pending consideration of the ordinance, which will be duly submitted.
Committee, you mean?
No, I'm saying I'm making a motion that the committee recommend that we hold it in council, so that way, if we do pass the ordinance, we don't have to then come back into committee to handle it.
So then, therefore, well, there hasn't been, therefore, just so the committee is clear on this, you're not taking a position on whether you're for or against this transfer.
In this vote, that's correct.
In this vote, you're merely holding off until Tuesday.
That is my motion.
Mr. Chair, question.
Do I have a second to the motion? I know, but do I have a second to the motion? No. I don't have a second, so the motion doesn't take up. Council Boschman, did you?
I was going to ask the question, if we vote it and put it to the council on the Tuesday night, are we going to be voting on it Tuesday night, or does it have to go to the council as a whole after?
I defer to the president of the council.
That's what I'm asking them now.
Yep.
The idea would be that, yes, this would get voted on Tuesday night unless the council then decides to hold it further. It would be up to the full council at that point. We could suspend the rules for the ordinance, put it through its first reading and make the transfer. We could hold the transfer until the ordinance is fully completed, or the council could just decide they don't like the ordinance at all, and then, I don't know what we do. But
I kind of like the ordinance, but I want to make sure, I don't want to drag this out for months here. I want to get it in and out if we're going to do this. I mean, I don't want you to come back Tuesday like we did with this whole darn thing here. We should have been talked that night when she was here.
I would
the first night.
Suggest make a motion to approve.
Well, one second. Let me just say that the reason why I didn't vote to hold it or second the motion is because, as the president said, irrespective of this, we can still move forward with this one way or another, irrespective of this. This still needs to get done, likely.
Right.
But the way I took his comments, and I agree with him, is, to me, they go together, but they're also separate. So this is not contingent on passing the order, yes or no.
Oh.
He's suggesting that he'd prefer that the council ends up doing that we do this in tandem, but he did say it's not required. And I actually agree with that assessment, and I therefore don't. This is not holding me up from deciding today whether I agree that this is the best course of action for the legal department of the city at large or not. I don't care if this gets done or not. My convictions are firm, and I made those quite clear tonight. But I will look at this, and I would prefer we vote on this separately, my opinion, but whether this gets passed or not doesn't change how I feel about the privatization at all. That's why I didn't agree to hold it.
I'd like to make a motion to approve 008-24.
Second.
I have a motion made and seconded to approve the transfer order 008-24. If there's no objections, I'll take a roll call vote on this.
Correct.
Councilor Walsh?
No.
Councilor Zarella?
no at this time, but I will.
No?
No.
I'm a no. Council Boschman?
Yes.
Council Cruz?
Yes.
Fails 3-2.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
We have motion made and seconded to adjourn. If there are no objections, we are adjourned. Thank you.